than 15 of them. That means we won't be able to finish before midnight, and then I will suspend the meeting.
配合
Second motion, implementing the Kai-tak planning to dovetail with Kowloon East development. For those who would like to speak, please press the request to speak button. I'll first call upon Mr. Wong Kwok-kin to speak and move his motion. President, I move the motion standing in my name in the order paper. The motion today is to implement the Kai-tak planning to dovetail with Kowloon East development. Kai-tak development is the largest coastal or waterfront development plan, which adjoins Wong Tai Sin district, and therefore the Kai-tak development would inevitably have some far-reaching impacts on the entire Kowloon Peninsula and also the neighboring districts. As a member from that district, I'd like to take the opportunity of the Kai-tak development so that we can also take advantage of the energizing Kowloon East development to bring about new momentum to the development of the entire area, and there would also be more employment opportunities. And I'd like to take the advantage of this development to help resolve some of the deep-rooted problems that have been with us for a long time. First of all, on public healthcare services, according to the Census and Statistics Department in 2011, during the census, out of the 18 districts in Hong Kong, Kwun Tong and Wong Tai Sin's elderly population ranked number 1 and number 4 out of the 18 districts. And in Kwun Tong, there are about 100,000 elders, accounting for some 10.8% of the total elderly population in Hong Kong. For Wong Tai Sin, we have 74,000 elders, accounting for 7.9% of the total elderly population in Hong Kong. And Wong Tai Sin actually is one of the districts with the highest ratio of elderly population. Moreover, in Kowloon East, as we all know, we have a high concentration of public rental housing estates with a large elderly population and also a large PRH population. Understandably, there would be an acute demand for public hospital services, and yet within the Kowloon East cluster, the resources given to that cluster is the smallest out of the 7 clusters, and we have already reflected that on a number of occasions, and I don't need to repeat that here again on this occasion. And within Wong Tai Sin, we do have a shortage of public healthcare services, and the situation is particularly serious. In Wong Tai Sin, we have 420,000 residents, and some 17.6% of them are elders. Some 80% of the residents live in public housing, and within the district, we only have 2 or 3 small-scale hospitals. For example, the Sacred Heart Hospital, and so on. And they are very small-scale, and there is no A&E services. And for residents with acute diseases or severe diseases, or if they require specialist care, they will have to go to another district to receive care from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital or Kwong Wai Hospital, and about a quarter of them will have to go to the United Christian Hospital in Kwun Tong. This situation has brought a lot of difficulties to the elders receiving care, and in some cases there might also be delay in care. So Wong Tai Sin residents have been wanting to see an improvement to the situation. But then what is difficult is that within the district, it's difficult to identify sites to develop a new hospital. Now, with the Kai-tak planning in place and seizing the opportunity, we strongly urge the administration to reserve land in a Kai-tak development area so that a large comprehensive hospital can be developed. I understand that the administration plans to build a children's hospital in Kai-tak is called the Center of Excellence for Pediatric Care. Of course, we are not against it. Indeed, we would very much like to have a Center of Excellence for pediatric services in that area. But then to have a comprehensive hospital in the district would be more urgently needed. It's a general hospital because it's not just going to benefit Wong Tai Sin residents, it's also going to provide service to Kowloon East, Wong Tai Sin, and also Kowloon City. What's more is that in Choi-hung Estate and in the surrounding area, 2 public housing estates have been completed. One is Chi-chuen Estate, the other is Tek-long Estate. And they will provide a total of some 13,400 units with a population of 33,500 residents. And that would only add to the demand for a general hospital in Kai-tak. In Kwun Tong, with the administration developing Anderson Road and also the former Anderson Quarry, there will be more public housing, and as a result, some 80,000 people will be moving in. And the United Christian Hospital in Kwun Tong is actually nearing saturation. And with the intake of new population, more pressure will be added to it. And we cannot afford to lose time in expanding the UCH. I understand that the administration has already set aside funds for the expansion of the UCH. We hope that it can be expedited. Another problem bothering Kowloon East is, of course, traffic problems. As we all know, in Kowloon East, we have many public housing estates, and many of them are actually built on the slopes. For example, Lam Tin, Sei Shun, we call it Shun Tin Shun Lei Shun On Shun Chi, Sao Mau Ping, Bodat, and the newly completed Sam Choi, Choi Tak, Choi Ying, Choi Fuk, and Chi-wai San. All these housing estates, when compared to the trunk road downhill, they can only rely on bus as a connection. And during the busy hours in the morning and evening, well, either there would be lost trips or there would be inadequate services provided by minibuses, and therefore it's very inconvenient. And also the transport fares would also be quite a burden to them. And for those living uphill, they would very much like to see the monorail in Kai-tak to be extended to those different districts in Kowloon East. And they would also like to see it connected to all the public housing estates uphill, so that that would provide greater convenience to the residents there. But then what's worrying is the road traffic and also the burden on the road traffic. For example, with the planning of public housing estates along Anderson Road, some 80,000 people will be moving in, and they will be relying on the Clearwater Bay Road going to Kowloon East and Kowloon West. They will also have to rely on Sao Mau Ping Road and also Chang Kwan O Road to the different districts in Kowloon East. And these 2 roads will be subject to a lot of traffic. And the Kai-tak new development area, there will be visitors brought in by the Kai-tak cruise terminal and the redevelopment of the Kowloon downtown or town center. There will also be new population moving in. And the Kwun Tong Road, which is already quite saturated, the pressure on these roads will be even more heavy. So how are we going to ease the pressure on these roads? And that would also be a very important subject to be considered in considering the planning for Kowloon East. And also, how do you connect Kwun Tong, Kowloon East, and Wong Tai Sin, and also the pedestrian link and also barrier-free access within these amongst these areas, and the pedestrian linking system with all these adjoining districts would also be a very important subject. We propose that we should develop semi-sunken open underground street networks, like the underground commercial district or streets in Japan, that would merge pedestrian flows, and that would also add special features to the areas. In developing Kai-tak, we should also consider whether there might be negative impacts to the development area and also the neighboring areas. For example, would there be big rent hikes? And as a result, in Kowloon East, some traditional small business operations in Kowloon East might find it difficult to continue with their business, and also the revitalization of industrial buildings might also mean that for the creative and cultural workers there, they might not be able to survive. And the administration is now proposing that they might want to go to underneath the flyovers, but then that could only be turned into a performance platform or stages. But then would that be appropriate? Would it be appropriate for them to completely move into those areas? And also with the operation of the Kai-tak cruise terminal, would that mean that there would be more pollution to the surrounding area? Would that also add to the pressure of the traffic and transport system there? We expect that in the process of developing the area, local features and cultural heritage should be kept. For example, the temple festival of temple fairs in Mong Tai Sin, and also in Chi-wai village, and also Longjin Bridge, and so on. And if we can minimize the negative impact, then in developing Kowloon East and also developing Kai-tak and energizing Kowloon East would bring about many opportunities for improving the environment and revitalizing our economy, and that would create more jobs so that residents there will lead a better life. So I'll pause here and I'll be responding to the amendments and others later. I now propose the question to you, and that is that the motion moved by Mr. Wong Kwok-kin be passed. Mr. Frederick Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, Mr. Alan Leung, and Dr. Leung Ka-lau wish to move amendments to this motion, while Mr. Frankie Yik wishes to move an amendment to Mr. Chen Kam-lam's amendment. This council will now proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. I will call upon the above members to speak in the above order, but they may not move amendments at this stage. Mr. Frederick Fung.
Mr. President, since the closure of the Kai-tak airport in 1998 and last Saturday, we welcomed the first cruise to be berthed at Kai-tak cruise terminal, that is the Celebrity Millennium. So we have waited for a long time for development to take place. Although this is a new development area, and instead of a bottom-down approach, we have this bottom-up approach, and then the Kai-tak new development area has ushered in a new consultation and public engagement model, with a lot of sports, tourism, and other facilities, and also railway network featuring environmental features such as ventilation, corridor, stepped building structure, and so on. In June, we are going to see the commissioning of Kai-tak Cruise Terminal, and 2 more public housing estates, Kai-ching Estate and Tak Long Estate, will start taking new population later. And also there have been improvements to Kai-tak channel and other improvement facilities for Kai-tak. And the close relationship between people and the place is now being built. Instead of an airport, Kai-tak will become a place where people can live and enjoy. The Kai-tak development would provide impetus to neighboring areas. Therefore, I have proposed some amendments to enrich the original motion so that the new development at Kai-tak would have a bearing on other places, such as a better transport network for Kowloon City and also Kowloon West. I propose a cycle track. I hope Mr. Wong Kwok-kin would understand that I move my amendments because I care about the interests of the resident there, and my amendment is complementary in nature to his motion. Actually, this is an area which links up with Kowloon City, Mata Wai, and of course, whatever new development that takes place in Kai Tak would have a bearing on these neighboring districts. There will be new developments and relocation of residents, and that they would be directly affected. Therefore, I want to propose certain amendments to just mention certain things that have been omitted, because we will not just be looking at the impact for Kowloon East. To the east and west of Kowloon, there should be other developments to tie in with Kai Tak's new development. Whether it's Kowloon East or Kowloon West or in the entire Kowloon area, Kai Tak would bring about positive and negative impacts to different areas, and we should speak out for them. I cannot see why there will be contradictions of interests just because of the new development in Kai Tak. I hope members can support my amendment. Kai Tak is something that we should all treasure, and our interest is in line with the residents' interest in Kowloon. So I speak and in appealing for support from members. The ADPL and I myself support the original motion. And through a supporter, the CE threw a test balloon saying that the Kai Tak sports facility will be relocated, because the CE has this mentality of launching a policy once it's mature. But this would affect the integrity of Kai Tak development, and the new proposal actually ignore the traffic impact. But because of a strong objection from stakeholders, this plan has fallen through. Well, this shows that the government has attached very little importance to sports development and has ignored the situation of the neighboring districts. The central Kowloon's route would be commissioned later, and with population intake of new Kai Tak public housing estates, will there be additional pressure on the road network? The administration must come up with the right projection to assess whether the road capacity can tie in with the new development in Kai Tak and neighboring districts. And we have to admit that people have a higher and higher expectation and aspiration for environmental protection. The traditional bureaucratic approach may not be able to respond to their aspirations in a timely manner. Many people would like to have a cycle track in the urban area because people are attaching higher importance to healthy living, and many people would like to have a cycle track near the waterfront, linking up different communities, and there should be a comprehensive network of cycle tracks so that people can use bicycles as a green transport to take the place of high emission mode of public transport. Therefore, I urge the administration to take on board the construction of cycle tracks, or whether we should also look at parking spaces for bicycles and give priority to bicycle traffic. There should be a waterfront cycle track network linking up different communities so that cycle tracks can reach different locations in the district so that bicycle truly become a convenient mode of transport.
Mr. Chen Kam-lam. President, last week the landmark development in Kai Tak development, that is the Kai Tak cruise terminal, was first commissioned with the first cruise liner berthing at this terminal. It shows that indeed we have energized Kowloon East, and the captain of the cruise liner, after berthing the cruise liner at our terminal praised our advanced facilities there, but then actually behind the terminal we still have a work site there, and it's very dusty. And other than the toilets, some other facilities have yet to be commissioned. And after landing at the terminal, after going through immigration clearance, visitors will have to take a bus and leave the terminal. It shows that Kowloon East development has been very slow-paced, and this is really disappointing. President, the reason why I'm so concerned about the pace of development in energizing Kowloon East, that's because energizing Kowloon East is not just about developing a waterfront area or a redevelopment plan. The importance of this project is that it will create another 5.4 million square feet of gross floor area, and that's double the size of of Central right now. And also in the new development area, it will provide more than 33,000 units in the new development area, including the first two sites whereby they would be designated as Hong Kong properties for Hong Kong people, and they will also be providing more units in the urban area, and they'll be the main source of supply of units there. And other than building a world-class cruise terminal, there'll be a major sports stadium, and we will also have the Long Jin Bridge, and also the first monorail system in Hong Kong. So all these are going to be major tourism infrastructure, and they're going to be the major tourist attractions in the area, and therefore it will not just be boosting tourism development, it's also going to boost economic development, and therefore it's a very important project. And it will not just be building new business node in Kowloon East, that would also bring about developments in the surrounding areas, and that would bring in new opportunities, and the residents there will also benefit. But then, of course, in the process of transformation, inevitably there would be problems, and there would also be changes, including some divided shares, and that would also hinder the development in old industrial areas, and also with increased pedestrian flow, the burden or the pressure on the environment and traffic would also increase. But then, while we have opportunities, we will also see rent hikes, and as a result, the SMEs will also be affected. However, in the process of such developments, such challenges can also be overcome at the policy level, and also the modification of plans and so on. I'm sure there are always solutions to these problems. The most important thing is for government departments, in particular the Energizing Kowloon East office, to pay attention or to take these problems seriously, so that they'll be able to come up with solutions and options promptly. We expect that the EKEO will be able to energize Kowloon East, and it will be able to play a key role in the process, and the concept will also help promote the development of the areas, and also they will also come up with timetables in developing these areas. What's regrettable is that up till now, the EKEO, other than organizing seminars and also the flyover operation and so on, not much has been done by the EKEO. Well, energizing Kowloon East involves the transformation of the old industrial areas, and also the development of new business and residential areas. And for redevelopment and also converting old industrial areas will not just involve dealing with the diversified or divided shares. And without policy support, it would be very difficult to rely solely on the business sector to do it. And for the conversion of old industrial buildings, we will have to have more support measures and also incentives in order to encourage the owners to convert their old industrial buildings. For example, we will have to relax the building height restriction. Plot ratio will also have to go up. And there should also be land exchange programs, and there should also be a longer mortgage repayment or installation or installment program that will also help develop the core business in Kowloon East. We expect that more concrete proposals can be proposed in order to boost the transformation of these industrial buildings. And also in the past, we have never had regional or district-based redevelopment of old industrial buildings, and this is also one of the biggest obstacles in developing or redeveloping old industrial buildings. Yes, the URA does not have this experience, but then in collecting the divided shares in old industrial areas and also the conservation work, I think it has got a lot of experience and it has been very successful, and therefore we should encourage the URA to play a more positive role in the process in promoting the transformation of the old industrial area. Connecting the different districts is also one of the major concepts or important concepts of energizing Kowloon East. That's why the DAB supports the implementation of the monorail system. This proposal has also been one of the pet subjects of the DAB. We have conducted a lot of researches in this area, but then for the monorail to play a key role in connecting the district, we have to make sure that there will also be connection between the Kai-tak runway tip and also the pier, without which the area will be segregated, and from the southern part of the development area and also from the cruise terminal to Kwok-hung, they will have to take a very convoluted route, and the entire connection will be destroyed or disrupted. And also, it's not just about the connecting bridge for the monorail. It will also be transcending the Kwok-hung typhoon shelter. There will also be a pedestrian footbridge, and it will also become a landmark in the entire area. And therefore, in branding Kowloon East, it's going to play a critical role. And therefore, we believe that in the original motion, we have to add in these features in order to highlight the importance of this monorail system. And I'll also be responding to the amendments. First of all, we have KK Fung, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, and Dr. Leong Ka-lau's amendments. Basically, many of their suggestions are very similar to those of the DAB, and therefore we'll be prepared to support them. In particular, with regard to the monorail, to extend it to Kowloon City so that we can have a bridge connecting Lei Yuen Mun to Sham Shui Po, so that there can be an extended waterfront promenade in order to improve the traffic network in Kowloon East, and there can also be more public housing units. Well, we have proposed that too, and therefore we'll be prepared to support that. But then concerning the cycling track and the proposal to extend it to the old district in or outside Kai-tak, we believe that technically and also in terms of actual implementation, there'll be problems, and we have to be pragmatic. We cannot just do it for doing's sake. But then, as I just said, the monorail will become a landmark structure or development in Kowloon East. It's not just going to be a backbone system, and it's also going to be a tourist attraction. And also with the train system, well, it's been studied for a long time, and therefore now we are already in an advanced stage. And if we now talk about other options, then it's like overturning what we have done before. And also for the other more efficient and environmentally friendly public transport system, there is no substance to this proposal. It shows that Mr. Alan Leong has not done any study at all on this subject. And also because the old runway tip and also between that and Kwok-hung Pier is only several hundred meters away, and therefore if it's done like what Mr. Frederick Yik proposes, so that all boats will be able to go in there, the connecting bridge will have to provide a headroom of at least 40 meters and even taller, because we have no idea as to what's meant by sea operating vessels, what types of vessels are they. So the construction costs will go up, and that will seriously affect the construction cost for this bridge and also the future operation of this bridge. President, we hope that for the Kwok-hung typhoon shelter, it can be redeveloped into a berthing area for yachts, because on the one hand, that would increase the tourist attractions there, and more jobs can also be created, and that would also turn Hong Kong into a new tourist spot. But then we also understand that for the cargo vessels, they will not be able to make use of the typhoon shelter that much, and therefore we hope that there should be another typhoon shelter set up for the use by these cargo vessels. Thank you.
Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Mr. President. For today's motion, it has been sponsored by Mr. Wong Kwok-kin. In fact, we share a lot of the views in his motion, but still, I would like to seek an amendment so that we can improve upon his motion on the basis of what we have seen at the district level. The purpose is merely to improve his motion. The administration has been saying that for energizing Kowloon East, it is to be an exercise of planning with the people. But I'm afraid that many people in Kowloon East don't feel the relevancy. Perhaps you have consultation exercises, you have workshops, but then within the community, it is not that easy to get information about the EKE, energizing Kowloon East. This is particularly so for Wong Tai-sin. Wong Tai-sin is supposed to be with Kowloon City, and then therefore the Wong Tai-sin residents feel that they have been isolated. But still, I would like to say that in the future, when the government is to work on the energizing of Kowloon East, please disseminate more information so that there will be greater community participation. And in fact, I think we need to do more to mobilize the people. For the monorail, we're supposed to have the second stage of the public consultation in the first quarter of this year. But it seems that we haven't heard any more news. And then for the public rental housing, it seems that there will be a change to the plot ratio, etc. Again, we haven't got any new information. All we can do is to read the newspapers and then try to find information. Therefore, it is worrying. Moreover, not too long ago, we had this problem with the multi-purpose sports complex, and many people are worried that things would go from bad to worse. We need to be careful. This is because we have had a lengthy discussion. We have already reached a consensus. We don't want to see much change. But of course, sometimes we have to change for a meaningful purpose. We have a housing need. In the past, for Kowloon East, we were supposed to have low-density development. Is it suitable? Perhaps we should reconsider it. Perhaps we should have more subsidized housing so as to meet the housing aspirations of our people. Of course, recently, we have been told about Hong Kong properties for Hong Kong people, or Hong Kong land for Hong Kong people. I've always said that the ultimate solution lies with the provision of subsidized housing. Public rental housing, home ownership, and sandwich class housing would be suitable. We are really worried as to whether we would really be getting Hong Kong properties for Hong Kong people. So, Secretary for the Development, instead of thinking of new ideas, I think it's better to use what has been proven to be correct, like the HOS or the sandwich class housing. Now, for Kowloon East, as the member has said, Chen Kam-lam has said that we see a lot of construction sites going on. Yes, the zero-carbon building has been completed, and we're supposed to get various other facilities to be commissioned. However, I'm afraid that the creative industries in the district have been affected. We know that for a period of time, the industrial buildings in Kowloon East have a lot of surplus office space and industrial space. As a result of the cheap rental, a lot of participants of the creative industries have moved into the factory buildings of Kowloon East so as to carry on with their creative activities. And as a result, we have seen a booming of the creative industry in Kowloon East. Now, the government has been advocating the development of creative industries. I think this is in line with the government's policy. Moreover, without any subsidies from the government, by being able to rent cheap factory buildings, we are able to see the development. And that's why I want to add an element to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion. I want to know if the administration will do something about it so as to make sure that the creative industries will be given assistance. Yes, we're supposed to be given a very rosy picture about energizing Kowloon East, but can the creative industries share in the development? Perhaps we can make use of the government factory buildings in Kowloon Bay. We have got 2 such buildings. They are of a large scale and they're suitable for the development of the creative industries. I hope that the government won't think of demolishing them so as to put up a office building or a commercial building. Otherwise, the creative industries will be driven away and they will be denied the chance to have creativities from a cheap rent place. Now, this will then go against the policy of replicating the Jockey Club Creative Activities Center in Kowloon West. You can't just shout slogans. You need to back up your slogans with action. Now, for creative industries, I don't think you can attach a $sign to creative industries. In fact, the artists would like to be given the space to develop themselves, to develop their industries. Of course, in the district, we are also faced with another big issue. In Kowloon East, we have many housing estates with an age of over 50, like Wai-kwok Estate, Pink Shack, Kai Yip, and Choi-hung. They are of a particular age and they have a lot of redevelopment potential. But does the government have a policy to redevelop the older housing estates? Will there be adequate and early planning in advance? Otherwise, I will be worried. Otherwise, you will be having a reception housing estate in Anderson Road Quarry. Today, you have Tak Long and Chi-chuen estates. So if you foresee that there will be redevelopment of the older housing estates, please consider the 2 new estates as reception estates. Otherwise, you will be missing the golden opportunity. And then in the policy address, emphasis has been given to low-carbon lifestyle. I've urged the administration to treat bicycles as a means of transport. It seems that I have yet to convince the administration. Now, for the new development area in Kai-tak, I think you should incorporate the concept of having bicycles as a means of public transport. Now, of course, it won't work in the older urban areas, but I think a new development area like Kai-tak should be amenable to cyclists. I'm not saying that bicycles should still be regarded as a tool for leisure or recreation. In fact, it should be a mode of transport so that we can practice low-carbon lifestyle. The cycle track network should be such that you should be sort of on a comprehensive network so that cyclists don't have to alight and then push the bicycles to cross the road. Otherwise, it will be difficult to practice a low-carbon lifestyle. So I urge the administration to think carefully. And then I want to comment on certain concepts. That is, for the government building clusters. I think they will be important for the Kai-tak development area. You're going to have a lot of transit population, and you will bring about consumption. And then the neighboring areas will have more business. Otherwise, you have to make a deliberate effort to bring people from another district because such a policy may easily fail. And then lastly, when the administration is to think about the development of the monorail, well, in fact, the DP did raise this idea in 2006, so please make sure that it is properly developed. Thank you.
Mr. Alan Leung. Mr. President, first of all, we have to thank Mr. Wong Kwok-kin for moving this motion to implement the Kai Tak planning and Kowloon East development, so that we can have a debate on how we can dovetail with the new developments and how we can energize Kowloon East. My amendment seeks to augment or supplement Mr. Wong's motion in a few areas. First, with relation with reference to the multi-purpose sports complex and the layout. Well, I haven't talked to Mr. Wong about this, but I hope that after listening to what I have to say, he would support it. The administration is now trying to seek or identify more land to build housing units to meet our housing demands. If a piece of land has been sown GIC, and if you turn this into residential land, it's a questionable move, especially if you try to include such GIC sites in the land sale program without securing town planning board approval. The Civic Party has suggested to the CE that there can be 8 measures to be adopted for increasing land supply for residential purposes, but I don't think he's going to accept any of those. If we only value speed at the expense of planning, this is not something we really desire. 3 community organizations, including the Professional Commons and other organizations on local studies, and another organization called War jointly published a report saying that without affecting a lot to the layout of the multi-purpose sports complex at Kai Tak, we can do something to increase the supply of PRH units by 7,000. And we can also increase the number of HOS units by 4,000, accommodating some 14,000 people. So how can this be done? First of all, they set out 3 principles on planning. First, without affecting environmental quality within the Kai Tak area, there can be ways to increase housing supply. And the major functions and parameters will be remain unchanged, and also the metro park and the multi-purpose sports complex will not have their integrity affected. So what are they going to do? First of all, the multi-purpose sports complex will move south. The secondary venue, the arena, will be moved closer to the main sports arena, so the footprint of the multi-purpose sports complex will not be will be reduced without affecting the integrity of the whole plan. The land so released can be made available for thousands of PRH, HOS, and private housing units. And then for the site of Zone RB1 to the north, we can also have 7,100 PRH units built there. And to the south of the runway, where we have a zone for the commercial or hotel, it should be make an extended part of Metro Park. So Metro Park's integrity will not be affected. They also propose that the greening area should be raised up to a higher level, to the first floor, and then we can release 150,000 square meters for catering, drink, retail, and other purposes. Civic Party has looked into their suggestions, and we believe that they are feasible. We hope the administration would have the broadness of mind to take on board these suggestions and incorporate them so that we can build a better community there. And I hope in his response, the Secretary would tell us that this will be actively looked into. and I hope he will not be saying that. He will not be ignoring or brushing aside suggestions from these community organizations. The other aspect that I want to achieve in my amendment is to increase in space, the amount of business space. Mr. President, if you want to start a business, it's difficult to find space. Rental for commercial space in the private sector has gone up very rapidly, and premises which used to be offered by the housing department are now in the hands of the link and cannot be made available to small businesses. In planning for Kai-tak, I hope, as my amendment suggests, we will find ways to prevent large chains enterprises from monopolizing all such premises, and there should be some areas reserved for SMEs so that we can have a diversified business environment. If this can be done, it would be a piece of good news to new business starters. So I hope the needs can be catered for. Mr. President, the third area covered by my amendment is a request that the government should make reference to the Covent Garden in London so that we can have some rules that would enable street arts performers to stage performances freely and orderly so that all can share the gaiety. In 2010, the government launched a trial scheme on outdoor performing venues covering the Hong Kong Art Center and the Kwai-ching Theatre. And starting from 2011, it was no longer a trial scheme, but only one venue was kept, and that is Sha Tin City Hall. It's said that 15 applications were received for the use of the Sha Tin City Hall, 6 were approved. Many performers who would like to use the venue were rejected. So 9 of them were rejected, 6 were accepted. If you go to a foreign country, you may feel that there's a rich cultural ambience because at subway stations and open piazzas, you can always see some street performers. And there's no conflict there between the pedestrians and these performers. And instead, you think that these performers enrich the street environment. The administration should work out some rules with street performers and street performing groups so that these performers can stage performances freely and orderly on our streets. We should learn from foreign experience. For example, in Taiwan, there are many cities with a licensing system for street performance, and they are managed by municipal governments. There are clear guidelines on whether they can receive payments or where they can stage such performances. I hope that my amendments can enrich the original motion moved by Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, and I hope other members will support it.
Dr. Leung Ka-lau, Thank you, Mr. President. When we implement the planning for Kai-tak, we should make sure that we won't have negative impacts on neighboring areas like traffic congestion and rising rental. We hope that we can try to make up for the shortfall in other areas. Mr. Wong Kwok-kin has also referred to his comments concerning public health care in Kowloon East. So I want to give some supplementary opinions. Now, for healthcare, currently the different clusters of hospitals do not get the same allocation of resources. All along, Kowloon East has only got 10% of the resources, despite a much higher proportion of population. And therefore, for the outpatient clinics to have to queue for a long time. This is because of the lack of hardware. There are only 2.1 hospital beds per 1,000, when compared with 6 in Kowloon West and also 5 in Hong Kong Island. It is much fewer. So I agree that there should be a general hospital in Kai-tak, and we should expedite the expansion of the UCH as well as the hospital in Wong Tai Sin, that is Our Lady of Marymount. But then we can't just rely on the public hospitals. This is because you need to queue up for your turn, and then patients cannot choose the service provider. Therefore, many citizens, in particular the middle class, as well as those who have got medical insurance coverage, even those living in public rental housing estates have got some private medical insurance coverage, so they have a demand for private hospital service. But then even in private hospitals, there's a lack of hospital beds. We have altogether 35,000 beds and in Hong Kong, but then only 12% of them are in the private sector, and yet it accounts for 20% of the patients. Even for cancer patients, if they go to a more popular private hospital, say for example the 2 in Kowloon City, they have to wait for quite a long time. So I think we need to reserve land on Kai-tak or Kowloon East for the construction of private hospitals. And private hospitals shouldn't be too far away from the population because they serve local patients. We only need 1 hectare of land to build a private hospital. But then for Kai-tak, we have a lot of land measuring 320 hectares. And then for other facilities, I want to say that other than housing, we need other public facilities like schools, markets, libraries, car parks, and even public toilets. Otherwise, there won't be a basis for sound development. Mr. President, Secretary, I have assumed that it is supposed to be common sense. However, my experience tells me that planning sometimes cannot be comprehensive. Different departments may adopt a compartmentalized mentality. Say, for example, we need an integrated community center for mental wellness. In 2010, we were told that 24 such centers would be built to support 18 districts. But so far, 70% of such centers cannot get a permanent site. For Kowloon East, for Kowloon City, we have a society serving 370,000 people, but they can only rent 1,800 square foot instead of getting 5,000 square foot. So instead of the recommended size, they've only got half of the space needed. And again, there's another society in Kwun Tong. They cannot get the space needed. And then for the Chuan Kwun O facility, since the link has said that it would affect the number of visitors, and so they have been rejected. Now, it is difficult to get a site for the integrated community centers for mental wellness because of popular objection. So I think it's better for the government to reserve land for such a purpose. Say, for example, if you reserve a few floors in a public rental housing estate, then you can reduce the resistance to the minimum. And then for the elders and the people with disabilities, we need residential care homes for them. Currently, we have got 25,000 subsidized places for elders in residential care homes. Usually they have to wait for 30 months. And then for the residential care homes for the disabled, 7,000 are on the waiting list. For those who are having a serious or medium level of impairment, they have to wait for 80 months before they get to their turn. So I just wonder if the administration can have some arrangements so that certain floor space can be reserved for such RCHs. I think by having such homes in private buildings, the private buildings will not fetch such a high property price. I understand that as a result of such a shortage, people have to wait for a long time. And then for the next 5 years, there would only be 3,100 places for the elders and 2,700 places for the disabled. We are faced with an aging population. So for such a number of new places, I'm afraid we can't even catch up with the shortfall that we have now. Therefore, in terms of the Kai-tak site, I think when it comes to the planning, I think the government should reserve space for the development of such welfare facilities. 37.85 hectares of land are for the purpose of GIC. I think it shouldn't just for the district. We should also serve the territory as a whole. Some have said that it should be rezoned as housing, so that or residential, so as to meet the housing needs. I can't agree with such a suggestion. This is because when it comes to town planning, we can't just focus on housing needs. We must have other public facilities. Otherwise, we can't provide a good living environment. If you try to get land whenever available for housing, it is not good. Otherwise, we can't meet the objective of energizing Kowloon East.
Mr. Frederick Yik. President, I'll be looking at the public transport system and also how we can change the use of the Kwok-hung typhoon shelter and also the implications. In order to dovetail with Kowloon East development, it's suggested that environmentally friendly link system and also monorail system be used to link up with other business districts. The Liberal Party is in favor of this, but then using the monorail system as the connecting system, is that the best choice? That cannot but give rise to some doubts or question marks. And also to dovetail with the alignment of the monorail system, we will have to build a connecting bridge between the former Kai-tak runway and also the Kwok-hung pier, and that would also change the use of the Kwok-hung typhoon shelter in order to increase the berthing space for cargo vessels and so on. That would pose risks to the marine operators. In fact, we are already having a shortage of berthing space in the typhoon shelter, and during when there is a typhoon, and if the vessels are not able to go into the typhoon shelter, then the risks will be tremendous, and therefore the relevant proposal must be considered very carefully. In fact, with regard to the construction cost of the monorail system, it's not just going to cost us some $12 billion, and also they will have to inject another $12 billion in order to replace the train and also the spare parts in 15 years. And if we insist on building it, that would be a waste of public money, and the rate of return will be very low. And I'm also, I have to declare interest because the Transport Logistics Society and also other community leaders have already said earlier that to construct the monorail system, they have some reservation. The present use of monorail system worldwide is not very popular, and also the construction and repair and maintenance costs would also be very high, and it's also inflexible, and it's not able to adjust the schedule very flexibly in accordance with the demand, and it's also not able to convert or to converge with other systems, and whether there are incidents, it would be difficult to rescue and so on. And therefore in Singapore and in Sydney, they've also demolished the monorail system which has been in place for many years. And other than building a monorail system, there are other environmentally friendly transport modes that we can choose. Given the fact that our monorail system has a lot of problems and is also not cost effective, should the administration think harder about other options? What I'm most concerned about is, well, to tie in with the alignment of the monorail system from Kwun Tong Pier and also the old Kai-tak runway tip, we will have to build a bridge costing some $2 billion, and the planned connecting bridge will be crossing the navigation channel of the typhoon shelter, and some of the vessels with a high headway. The headroom will have to be 40 to 50 meters, and it's proposed that the bridge will only be 21 meters above sea level, and some 100 vessels with high masts would not be able to enter, and that would not just affect marine operations, and also where there is a typhoon, such high mast barges will also not be able to go into the typhoon shelter, and as a result, there might be a repeat of the incident that happened 2 years ago. That is, we have a barge hitting Hang, and therefore we believe that we will have to take care of the interests of the marine operators, so that there would be sufficient headroom, so that different types of vessels will be able to go in and out of the typhoon shelter, and also to built berths for yachts in a Kwun Tong typhoon shelter in order to perfect the planning for the area. We believe that there must be sufficient parking or berthing spaces for other types of vessels. Only then will we consider providing berthing spaces for yachts, because the typhoon shelter is meant to be a shelter for different types of vessels. It's a very essential facility, but then we do have a shortage of such facilities because there are not many bays that are suitable for the construction of a typhoon shelter. But then for berths for yachts, I'm sure there are many other choices. For example, many years ago, we had the Hailing Chow typhoon shelter. Because of the remote location and also because of the high tides there, it's very risky, and therefore marine operators try to avoid that altogether. And as a result, the utilization rate has been very low. And according to some of these operators, the present berthing spaces in a typhoon shelter are already inadequate, and also with different infrastructure projects underway, the demand for vessels plying in a harbor would increase, and therefore there will be an even more acute demand for such typhoon shelter facilities. And without a proper location for the reprovisioning of a similar facility, as Mr. Chen Kam-lam just said, to change the use of the typhoon shelter so that more space can be set aside for leisure use, I don't think that would meet the demand, and that would also affect the safety of the marine operators. I have to repeat this. That is, Hong Kong's success has a lot to do with the contribution of the marine operators, and they will continue to contribute to such developments, and also that will also provide more low-cost logistics services, and that would be very important to our logistics industry in Hong Kong. And today we are looking at urban development, and we are trying to exclude them altogether, and we are actually ignoring the safety. This is not good. And to provide a safe typhoon shelter for marine operators is an unshakable responsibility of the administration, and therefore, before we try to think about these plans for the typhoon shelter, we have to take the safety of these marine operators as our top priority, and therefore I do amend the motion. Secretary for the Bureau.
I would like to thank Mr. Wong Kwok-kin for moving the motion. I'm also grateful to the 6 members who have moved amendments, so that today I can talk about the project to energize Kowloon East as well as the development of Kai-tak. but then it covers a large number of topics. So I would like to provide some information in advance so as to facilitate the debate. I may have to speak for a longer time. In 2011, the CE announced that we will have a coordinated and integrated approach to expedite the development of Kowloon East so that Kai Tak, Kowloon Bay, and Kwun Tong will become an attractive business area so as to support the economic development of Hong Kong. Well, for the Kai Tak OZP, for the planning of Kai Tak, we'll have culture, sports, greenery as the themes, so that we have a vibrant Kai Tak for the enjoyment by the public. We hope we can meet the public aspirations. Kai Tak development is a very complicated project measuring 320 hectares, involving the North Apron and the South Apron areas of the former Kai Tak Airport, as well as the runway. And we have also covered the Kowloon waterfront. There were a number of changes and revisions in relation to the number of people living there. There should be 89,000 people living there. It will play a very important role. It will drive the continuous development of our economy. It can also revitalize the neighboring areas like Kwun Tong, Kowloon City, and Wong Tai Sin. In transforming Kowloon East, Kai Tak development area will have business, entertainment developments, and then there will also be transformation of the former industrial areas nearby. So Kowloon East can become a premier business area. In 2010, in fact, since the transformation, we have seen the provision of 1.4 million square meters of office space, and as a result, Kowloon East can become another CBD. For the office, which was set up last year, in fact, we have the place-making approach. So we want to improve the connection, and we emphasize a number of concepts. That is connectivity, branding, design, and diversity. In fact, the Energizing Kowloon East office is actively promoting a number of initiatives, hoping that Kowloon East can be energized as a place to work and to spend our leisure time. To tie in with the transformation of Kowloon East and to make sure that we can meet the housing aspirations of our citizens, we are now examining the zoning of Kowloon of Kai Tak, including North Apron, South Apron, and the former runway. We try to see whether we can provide more land for office and housing, but we don't want to affect the future land supply in the coming 5 years. We would like to come to a conclusion in this year, and we want to carry out a detailed technical study concerning the transport impact on the nearby areas, and will consult the public. For Kai Tak development, it is under construction. To expedite the completion, we are having a phased approach. Towards the end of 2013, we would like to complete a number of projects, and the progress is smooth. We should be on time. Like in the middle of the year, we have the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal building as well as the first berth. And then on top of the cruise terminal, there will be a new radar system. And then on the North Apron, there will be public housing, and there will be the cooling system. And in South Apron area, we have the fire service station, ambulance station, and then stage 1 of the runway park, as well as the relevant facilities. And there will be Kai Tak approach Lula, as well as the bio remediation works. And then I would like to comment on the topic in 4 areas, including conservation, among other things. I would like to respond to the issues of concern to members. First of all, town planning and greening. To tie in with the need to have more greenery in Kowloon East, the EKEO has been working with the CEDD, TD, Highways Department, Lands Department, LCSD, etc. And in fact, they have already suggested that given the crowdedness of Kowloon East and Kwun Tong, there will be more greenery. Say, for example, there will be more landscape along the pavements. And in fact, at Hoi Pen Road and Lai Yip Street, we have already seen some successful examples. Moreover, the EKEO is also trying to beautify the existing facilities, like the Hoi Pan Road Park is turned into a boulevard, and in fact, more trees were planted along many streets, and then King Yip Street Nullah will be turned into Chaping River. There will be a lot of beautification projects. And then for the Kowloon Bay pedestrian network, there will be a lot of greenery, and we'll be working together with the private sector so as to have more greenery in their facilities, and we encourage the private sector to put in a greater element of greenery in their developments. And we hope that we can have a sort of a compatible development. And then for Chun Yip Street, we would like to have an open approach. And then we have also got a idea about the Kwun Tong Industrial Heritage Park with a themed installation, so that it becomes a place which is of attraction for public arts. We are now working together with the relevant departments to do the planning, and we have to relocate some of the playgrounds. At the same time, we have taken the lead to do something in January. In fact, at Chun Yip Street, we have already started the first stage of our improvement. For the waterfront promenade, in fact, we are working very hard in this regard, and we are making sure that it will become more accessible. And then, depending on the actual circumstances, we are trying to have a waterfront promenade on both sides of Victoria Harbour. While we're having such major projects, we'll also make use of the window before we can put in place the major projects. And in fact, with the joint efforts in the past few years, we've been able to complete a number of short-term improvement projects. Say, for example, Kai Tak Waterfront Promenade, Stage 1 will have the runway park first phase being completed. And then for the cruise terminal, again, we believe that in 2014 it will be completed. The Kai Tak development area will provide 11 km long promenade at the waterfront, and we are going to improve the accessibility as well as the connectivity. It is going to be long-term work. We'll be working together with the relevant districts, and the district councils will try to explore and implement the various projects to beautify the waterfront. We want to have an accessible waterfront for public enjoyment. For Kowloon East, we want the waterfront to be vibrant. Therefore, the EKEO has come up with an integrated strategy to beautify the waterfront. And in fact, the first one is to make use of the land under the Kwun Tong bypass. And in fact, we have already opened the place to the public. It has become very popular. It is the flyover number 1. We hope that in the course of transformation of Kowloon East, we can take care of the needs of different stakeholders. In fact, what we are doing in Kowloon East is to find opportunities to allow participants in the creative industries and cultural industries to have more space to practice their arts, so that Kowloon East will become a place with a lot of culture. We'll make good use of the unused land or underused land under flyovers, and we'll try to see if existing buildings or newly completed buildings can have an element of art and culture. Moreover, the HAD has been in support of the district council in providing featured activities. Say, for example, we have got hawker bazaars, and at appropriate locations, if there's suggestions to host any fairs or bazaars, will be very supportive and will provide the help. As to the idea of having a cycle track network, well, in urban Kowloon, it is very congested. It is difficult to spare land for dedicated cycle tracks. In other words, cyclists would have to share the road with other motorists. It would be too risky. Because of the safety concern, we do not encourage people to use bicycles as a means of transport in the urban area. But then for new development areas and in new towns where it is more sparsely populated, bicycles can be used as a means of transport for short trips. Therefore, whenever possible, we try to have cycle tracks in the new development areas. We'll also improve the existing facilities to facilitate the use of bicycles for leisure purpose or for short trips. According to the OZP, for the South Apron and on both sides of the runway, the waterfront promenade will become a cycle track measuring 6 km for leisure and recreation. The CDD is also looking at the possibility of extending the cycling track network in Kai-tak so that the public can make use of it in a more convenient way. And then the various attractions will also be linked up. For transport in Kai-tak development area, we have planned for sufficient roads to meet the needs. The main road will be made up of a number of trunk roads, district roads, and local roads. Other than the airport tunnel, Longcheng Road, and Kwun-tong bypass, we have the planned Route 6, Central Kowloon Route, Trunk Road T2, and Nam Tin Tunnel. They will provide a link between Kowloon East and Kowloon West. It will be a quick link. In particular, Central Kowloon Route will be most facilitating. And then for the former apron area, there will be a direct link with Route 6. For the pedestrian network, well, according to Kai-tak OZP, Kai-tak new development area will have a number of linkages with the existing road network so as to facilitate the traffic from and to Kai-tak. There will be well-designed roads. There will be another 25 pedestrian lanes so that Kai-tak will be well connected with other places. We have already completed 2 elevated footbridges and 3 subways, and we've also improved some at-grade crossings so as to tie in with the intake of population at 2 PRH estates in Kai-tak. And in fact, the OZP has also suggested that we should have 2 underground shopping malls. They will be connected with Sampo Kong as well as the Kai-tak station of the Sha Tin Central Link. The underground shopping mall is being planned, but then we have to have further studies before they can be implemented. We want to have a barrier-free access environment, in particular for the elders as well as the PWDs. The new policy will make sure that we have a universal access environment. Currently, there are 3 footbridges crossing a number of major roads. They are subways, and all of them have been improved, and they've been given a facelift, and they will take people to Kai-tak. And in fact, the subways will be given some steel and glass panels for the rooftop. The illumination will be good, and it will be of an LED design so that it is environmentally friendly. And then on the wall panels will be featuring the photographs of the district. It will be funny, it will be interesting, and in fact we will be showing the former look of the district. For the environmentally friendly link, there was a study to look at the environmentally friendly linkage system. Initial findings show that a monorail system, which is elevated, will tie in with the development of Kai-tak so that we can have a green environment. It will also improve the accessibility of Kowloon East business area. It will also become another tourist attraction. The EFLS will measure 9 km with 12 stops, and it will serve all the major development projects in Kai-tak. It will also take people through Kowloon East. It will also be linking up Kwun Tong as well as the tip of the runway. A number of MTR stations as well as the Kai-tak station of the SCL will also be connected. We have already consulted the public in relation to the initial design. We are now analyzing the feedback, and in relation to the system itself, further details will be explored. And in the middle of this year, we'll have another stage of public consultation. The EFLS will be monorail. It is elevated. It will be difficult to go uphill. It can't run at a higher gradient. So the proposal to extend it to the mid-levels of Kowloon East, it will be difficult. Moreover, extending it will mean that we have to be above the MTR stations which are elevated. So we do not suggest that it should be extended to the mid-levels of Kwun Tong. In fact, we have a number of projects concerning the Longjin Bridge, and we have collective views as to how to preserve the Longjin stone remnants. We have already reached a consensus. They should be conserved in situ, and there will be a gallery to show the Longjin bridge remnants. And in fact, we are going to take people to Kowloon Walled City Park as well. All such ideas have already been incorporated into the OZP. Kowloon City has a long history, has got a lot of heritage. It is in a good position to have a heritage trail. In fact, we have already formed a platform to consult the people of Kowloon City to seek the views on rejuvenating Kowloon City. We have completed the first stage. A number of suggestions have been made, and in fact there was this idea to have a heritage walk so as to link up with the various attractions. Once we finalize on the details, the AMO will provide the background information concerning the various heritage sites, and the AMO will also provide technical advice and will coordinate the job. For the cruise terminal, we have already given an account. The progress is good. The first berth will be ready in the middle of this year. The first cruise had a trial berthing on the 16th of March. We have looked at the timetable for the other developments at the former runway tip. There will be a dual carriageway to link the cruise terminal with Changnip Street in Kowloon Bay so as to tie in with the growth in traffic. And then we'll also look at the road network serving the central Kowloon route so that there will be a quick link between Kowloon East and Kowloon West so that it's easier to reach the cruise terminal. It is believed that most of the cruise visitors will take the coach or taxi to go to and from the cruise terminal. There will be sufficient space for the taxis to have curbside activities. There will be coach parking spaces. There will be sufficient space for loading and loading. So if necessary, we can provide for franchise buses as well. And then for the tip of the runway, we have already got plans to have a public transport interchange. Its implementation will depend on the timetable for other projects like the Metro Park and other facilities. The HAB in 2010, in relation to the multi-purpose sports complex in Kai-tak, commissioned a consultancy study. We have looked at the financial models. Initially speaking, we can have a design and build and operate model. the administration is looking at the suggestions, and we're trying to have an initial sounding out. Towards the end of February, 40 letters of intention have been received in relation to the sports complex, in relation to the management, etc. We're going to consult the sports community, the community at large, and the district council. Depending on the final procurement and financial model, we believe that in 2019-2020 it will be completed. And then for the sports complex in Kai-tak, will be serving the public in terms of sports as well as recreational needs. And the facilities will be open to the public for 7 days a week. For the trade and industry tower, the work has been completed. It will be completed towards the end of 2014. We'll be monitoring the progress to make sure that it will be completed on time. And there will be sufficient space on Kai-tak development area to relocate the government offices from Wan Chai. And this will help to energize Kowloon East. For the helipad, for cross-boundary traffic, but then there are uncertainties in the external economic environment. We need to have a reassessment for the need for cross-boundary helicopter service to ascertain whether we need it and whether to have it there. So it all depends on the findings of the study. I think the site for this purpose can be used temporarily for other purposes. Hospitals. We have already got 3 sites on Kai-tak for hospital or healthcare uses. One of them is to be a general hospital, and the hospital authority will re-examine the need for hospital facilities in the light of the planning, in particular the aging of population, among other factors. And there will be, we'll try to see if we need an acute an emergency hospital. If necessary, we can expedite the work so as to satisfy the needs for health care. Mr. President, so I speak and I'll be listening to members carefully, and then I will give a reply.
Dr. Wai-kwok. President, when I was young, I lived in Kowloon City, and I went to a secondary school in that same district. After junior secondary education, I went to Hon. I've lived there for 30 years before I moved out of Kowloon East. Therefore, I have a deep emotional attachment to Kai-tak and Kowloon East. On the 16th of June, a cruise named Celebrity Millennium berthed at Kai-tak Cruise Terminal, the first one to berth there, which is very symbolic in significance. After the Kai-tak airport was relocated, the land has been left unused for 15 years. The $8.1 billion cruise terminal would will receive another cruise with a lot of passengers. So we are going to see a lot of tourists coming to Kai-tak once again. Kai-tak development area is a big waterfront site with a size of 320 hectares. Apart from cruise terminal, there will be a recreational and hotels and business building and so on. It will become the core area of Kowloon East, bring about developments in the neighboring districts. This will provide a new impetus for our growth, and more space will be made available for residential use, and there will be job opportunities because a number of purposes are served by Kai-tak, including the healthcare, residential, tourism, and so on and so forth. So it demands a lot on planning. The project will be commissioned or completed one by one. And other supplementary facilities must be completed to tie in. Are they ready? How do we balance the different needs and aspirations of tourists and residents? This is the biggest test for Kai-tak development. The tourist terminal in Kai-tak is the biggest tourism infrastructure after the Disneyland. Prior to that, Ocean Terminal was the major terminal for cruises. And when they arrive, they can take in the beautiful scenery on both sides of the harbor. But Ocean Terminal can only accommodate medium-sized cruises. Those with 100,000 tonnage or more will have to berth at Kwai-chung. So the cruise terminal would make up a gap. But with the trial berthing of the cruise, it seems that the facilities need more improvement. For example, transport to urban area would require dedicated vehicles provided by the administration, and there's no major shopping facilities there. Tourists find this inconvenient. And also the passenger terminal, the retail space is only 60,000 square feet, much lower than that in Ocean Terminal, which is 550,000 square feet. With the formal commissioning of Kai-tak cruise terminal drawing near, the government must pay attention to this. To attract more cruises and more tourists so that they can spend money in Hong Kong, we must explore and develop new attractions with local characteristics. There are many heritage attractions. In Kowloon City, there are many restaurants. So we should develop items with Eastern characteristics. And we should also make use of Lei Yuen-man's seafood facilities so as to develop a bazaar and to attract retailers. We should also cooperate with mainland port authorities to develop the routes with major attractions linked up, and also to link up with our theme parks and other attractions to maximize the benefit. With our experience of promoting the mainland tourists coming to Hong Kong, if the infrastructure is insufficient, then residents may find things rather inconvenient. This is another test for Kai-tak development. There are three issues that we must face up. First, transport network. The administration must examine the capacity of road networks as well as the road network in Kowloon as a whole to assess whether it will be sufficient to meet the daily needs of residents as well as needs arising from tourism. We are also concerned that in energizing Kowloon East and developing Kowloon East, rental of shops may go up significantly, leading to a higher burden for businesses. And new businesses will be stifled, and there will be no variety. And tourists and residents will be denied more choice. To take on board the opportunities afforded by the building of the trade and industry tower, more government offices should be built there. On the day the cruise berth at the cruise terminal, some green groups protested that there was no onshore electricity supply, and the cruise company refused to use low sulfur diesel, and that resulted in high pollution for neighboring districts. The government must solve these problems. And two sites have been offered for the Hong Kong under the Hong Kong Properties for Hong Kong People scheme. The government should announce whether there will be any change to the parameters, such as whether the port ratio will be raised, so that there can be a community-wide discussion. These are my remarks. Ms. Priscilla Leung. Mr. President, the Kai-tak Cruise Terminal is going to be commissioned. I would like to thank Mr. Wong Kwok-kin for moving this motion. This motion is not just about Kowloon East. It will also cover Kowloon West, as well as our aspiration to have a promenade linking Kowloon East and Kowloon West. I agree with Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion and all the amendments. All these have to do with our natural resources, in particular Victoria Harbour. This world-class harbour is our treasure. So how can we make use of the opportunity to improve water quality of Victoria Harbour? This is a major concern for members. I've been in this council for 5 years. Together with my colleagues in the district, I've been asking and striving for the development of a green promenade and a waterborne transport, as well, in particular, water taxi, and also the reintroduction of ferry services across the harbour. I will be concentrating on waterborne transport and water quality today. How can we have a system of waterborne transport that would meet the needs of tourists and also alleviate pressure of land transport? I'm glad from the cruise operator that at present the cruise terminal rely on taxi, minibus, and coaches for outbound transport. They are now working with the administrations on ways to improve public transport. They would like to have a public pier there so that our people and tourists will have one more choice. In May 2008, I talked to the Development Bureau and suggested that there should be a water taxi service serving Kowloon East to Kowloon West. And it would become a quality waterborne transport system for tourists and local people. In the past years, ferry routes closed one by one, and they disappeared one by one. I hope the administration would change its mind so that the existing ferry routes can remain. And for those which disappeared, such as Kowloon City to North Point, should be put up for retender so that they can be revived. From where I live, I can see the two ferry piers. So every day, I wish that these ferry services can be there to serve our people again, so as to meet the huge demand arising from the development of West Kowloon Cultural District and Kai-Tak Cruise Terminal. The cruise terminal is going to cause a lot of pollution to our water and to our air. The exhaust from vessels is a major source of air pollution. With the commissioning of the cruise terminal and with the Kai-Tak Fantasy commissioned, there will be more cruises coming to Hong Kong. In the past years, we have been saying that the odor and the air pollution would be a source of much public discontent. And with a higher population move into Kai-Tak, well, actually, on a daily basis, we produce 2.6 million cubic meters of effluents every day. With the commissioning of Kai-Tak Cruise Terminal, I think not just Tai Kok Tsui will be affected. Water quality in Victoria Harbour would deteriorate, and it may be the worst in Hong Kong. A green promenade linking up Kowloon East and Kowloon West is a dream espoused by many people, especially those in Kowloon West, and that's also my aspiration since I took part in politics. If we jog there and or we use the cycle track, is it going to be good for our health if we embark on such activities? we have to bear in mind that Kai Tak cruise terminal would attract a lot of cruisers and tourists. But if what they can experience is just a bad odor, it would be a blemish on our reputation. We understand that their charter was assigned by cruise terminal or cruise operators so that they would switch to low sulfur diesel, but only 17 of them have signed up, and it was just 14% of total. There must be a carrot or stick approach. The charter must be the charter is binding, but it's of limited use. It's better than nothing. I understand the administration is now providing economic incentive to encourage cruisers that switch to the use of low sulfur diesel so that they pay lower port charges. But there must be a long-term measure so that all cruisers would switch to low sulfur diesel when they berth here, and other cruisers would be subject to higher taxes or tariffs. The former governor McNichols left us McNichols Trail. If the cruise terminals gives us a promenade, it would be a major achievement of the SAR government, and that will be something that we can praise for years to come.
Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, President. There is a Chinese saying that, if we go into the woods, then the trees or the woods can no longer be used, and therefore we have to ensure that there is sustainable development. That's the traditional or conventional wisdom of Chinese people. But then in terms of greening and environmental protection, we have done little to achieve that. We have just started our discussion on the recycling and reuse of glass bottles, and we are actually lagging behind Taiwan and Japan. And for light pollution, we are actually and for API, we are actually 25 years behind. And therefore, we should take the opportunity of energizing Kowloon East, and we should improve environmental protection so that there can be green nodes, so that that could become a pilot area for environmental protection. We understand that in this plan, already some green facilities have been included, or measures have also been introduced to protect the environment. We are pleased to hear that. For example, we're going to have a first environmentally friendly linkage system, that is the monorail system. But then to be more environmentally friendly, we also have to deepen such developments, and there is always room for improvement. And therefore, I urge the administration to implement the recycling and recovery facility, and a more comprehensive network should be established, and also sorting at source should also be encouraged. For example, food waste, used batteries, and also stationery, and so on and so forth. All these can be recycled and reused. And of course, wastewater can also be reused and recycled with the use of technology. Kowloon East should also be the starting point for energy efficiency, and in particular in the new Kai-tak development area, we can have greener buildings and green schools and also green community facilities, so that Kowloon East can also be built into the one of the lowest carbon emission area. And a lot has been said by Priscilla Leung, and I'm not going to repeat them. And also, comprehensive support measures are also very important for development. We talk about people-based development, and therefore, town development cannot be singled out of other developments, and therefore we have to make sure that we will adhere to those principles. And I think we should also identify areas for the birthing of yachts, and there can also be recreational facilities. But then in the typhoon shelter in Kwun Tong, if we were to implement these measures, then that might affect the fishermen and also other operators in the area. Therefore, the administration should consult the stakeholders as soon as possible, and it should come up with measures and also the impact of such developments on the sectors, and also more support should be given to these sectors, and they should also be engaged so that they can be part and parcel of the plan, and that would minimize the impact of such developments so that we can achieve a win-win situation here. Also, we have to balance conservation and development. That's also one of the highlights, and therefore there is a need for the administration to consider this very carefully. For example, many people have told us that we can cover this all the way to Lei Yue Mun so that we can take advantage of the unique heritage there in developing the area. I think this is also desirable, and therefore the Kwok-hung, because of the typhoon shelter there, we still have dockyards and also the food wholesale market, and also these are the testimony of the fishing industry's development. And therefore, in replanning for development for these areas, other than preserving some of the present dockyards, in preserving the workshop, and we should also preserve the architectural features of these buildings. We should also consider promoting the development of the creative industry there, and that would also reduce the burden there. And we can also enhance the typhoon shelter features there. In other words, we should also consolidate and coordinate the wholesale fishing markets development, and also seafood facilities, so that hygiene can also be improved, so that visitors can come and they can also buy the seafood and have them cooked right away, so that there can be one-stop service, so that our unique typhoon shelter culture will become even more attractive. What I've said is that conservation, development, creative industry, they can coexist side by side one another. It's all about the administration's determination. And therefore, Kowloon East, if Kowloon East is to develop into a sustainable business area, other than developing environmental protection industry and also other developments, we will also have to ensure that there will be diversity in the development. We will also have to engage the stakeholders so that energizing Kowloon East can also become energizing the entire territory. Thank you. Ms. Dari Lee. President, I'm grateful to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin for moving this motion. I fully understand that for residents in Kowloon East, they would very much like to see high-tech development, dovetailing, energizing Kowloon East. Just now, I've heard a number of members reflecting the sentiments of Wong Tai Sin residents, because apparently Wong Tai Sin residents think that energizing Kowloon East might have very little to do with them. But then, as a member from that constituency, in particular from the Kowloon City District Council, I think I'm really very disappointed that the administration has not included Kowloon City in the whole project. Energizing Kowloon East, historically speaking, when it comes to high-tech, you always think about Kowloon City, and therefore residents in Kowloon City have been waiting for 10-20 years, and now they're finally able to see they are able to see the development of high-tech area. But then Kowloon City is not included, and it's quite an irony. So in energizing Kowloon East, you're actually not energizing Kowloon City. And therefore, in coming up with this plan, I've already suggested in this council, and I've put this to the Secretary for Development back then, that's the incumbent CS for Administration, and I said that at least Kowloon City should be included in the project. But then that was not accepted by the administration, and now we are saying that energizing Kowloon East office post should be extended, and that's proposed at the ESC. But then still, the coverage would only cover Kwok-hung Kowloon Bay and also Kai Tak New Area. And also one of the functions is to assist in the coordination and monitoring the infrastructure development in Kwok-hung and also the strategic development in Kai Tak. President, I find it difficult to understand. How come when you look at the strategic development of Kai Tak, why don't you also look at the adjoining districts? In particular, the administration area that it belongs. How come Kowloon City cannot be included? That's why I have also put this to your colleagues, and they've given us an answer in this council, and they said that well, for Kowloon strategic development, other adjoining areas should not be excluded. I hope that you can confirm this again, so that I'll be able to explain this to the residents there. Well, during the last term of this council, and in the same forum, I've suggested and I've explained why we should expand the area, and now we have Mr. Chen, who is now the incumbent Secretary for Development. But then I'd like to once again reflect the sentiments of the residents there. It's not just about expanding the Kai-tak area, because the Kai-tak site is the last site in the urban area without planning and without specific plans, and ultimately, if we are able to energize Kai-tak and implement the plan, at least we should energize the entire Kowloon Peninsula. And last time I already put forth four reasons why we should expand it. Number one is the historical legacy, because Kai-tak and Kowloon City have a lot of historical links, and if the two are segregated and developed separately, that would not be in line with history. And secondly, it's about the geography, because Kai-tak is located in Kowloon City, and if we are able to integrate the development of To Kwa Wan and Kowloon City, then the synergy effect will be even greater. And thirdly, if we were to integrate the old and the new, for example, in Kowloon City we have a lot of old and new buildings, and if we are able to include that, then we'll be able to revitalize Kowloon City more speedier. And also in Kowloon City, the residents have been looking at Kai-tak Airport, and a lot of business opportunities have been brought about, and they have seen Kai-tak left abandoned for more than 10 years, and now you're energizing Kai-tak, and yet you're not going to include Kowloon City. You can understand how disappointed they are. And actually, the district council already passed a motion in February last year, asking that To Kwa Wan Old District and also Kowloon City be included in the Kai-tak project. You can see how strong these views are. And regrettably, the administration has not come up with a concrete response so far. And today, in the ESC paper, I find it even more disappointing. And also, one of the other things that is most disappointing to the residents is about the alignment of the monorail. You said that, in Kwun Tong, they also have the Satin Central Link, and therefore part of the alignment will also go into this area. But then the DAB also said that in Kai-tak we should also have more developments, and we hope that the old Kai-tak airport should be connected with To Kwa Wan. I hope that in the second stage public engagement exercise you can come up with further proposals, and you should not rule the possibility of linking the monorail system with To Kwa Wan, so that residents there can also be involved in the discussion. I've already put this to the former secretary, and back then the secretary said that because Kowloon City is a residential area, and therefore the nature is different, and therefore the purpose of developing Kai-tak is to develop it into a business area. But then a business, I think we need to have an integrated, comprehensive development, because we also have to have food establishments and also a lot of other developments, and therefore I hope that Kai-tak can also be linked up with the adjoining area, so that a more comprehensive development can take place. And also one of the inadequacies is, as mentioned by Ms. Priscilla Leung, is about the connectivity of the promenade, because according to your plan, the waterfront promenade would only connect all the way up to To Kwa Wan. But then as regards other parts of Kowloon, we actually want to have an uninterrupted promenade. We want to have a new waterfront, because Kowloon East and Kowloon West residents all need a continuous new Kowloon waterfront promenade. In fact, on the Hong Kong Island, they also want the same. And therefore, we have been proposing that throughout the territory, we should have a continuous waterfront promenade linking up the entire coastline. And therefore, we should have the Harbourfront Authority, which will be working towards building a continuous waterfront promenade.
Ms. Yuen-han. Mr. President, I have strong feelings. I'll be speaking on the points raised by Mr. Starry Lee in a moment. When the Kai-tak moved away, the two district councils kept on doing something for the new area. We have been pressing the government for response. Therefore, I have strong feelings about the points mentioned by Ms. Starry Lee. Mr. President, this motion is clear. We are talking about implementing the Kai-tak planning to dovetail with Kowloon East development. For many years, for more than 10 years, the residents there have been there waiting and watching things. People ask me whether I can walk over to the new area in the future. But so at the early stage, we asked that there should be an underground street at the Regal Hotel, Airport Regal Hotel. At that time, the Ribbon Garden and the other residential developments were not there. We asked for a footbridge to be provided. The two district councils concerned have been persevering in asking the government to respond. Mr. Kwok-kin said this is a good planning, comparatively speaking. This used to be my constituencies, like those residents there. We hope these districts can be energized or revitalized. 320 hectares can allow a lot of things to happen. Originally, I wanted to support Mr. Alan Leung's amendment, but after listening to him, well, I'm a bit worried. They are talking about moving the secondary stadium to somewhere else. He doesn't understand why we are so concerned about the sports complex. It's a sunken facility. There's a direct ventilation corridor, like the Leighton Street, all the way uphill. We look at the skyline, the ventilation, the visual corridor, and so on. It has been our major concern. This area has more than 300 hectares. There have been so many consultation exercises, and I witnessed the whole process. We may have very good wishes. I criticize Mr. Choi for trying to insert residential buildings here and there, ignoring the overall planning. I hope the administration will not be listening to the views of supporters of Chi-wai Leung. Community organizations have been paying attention to the development plan for years. In Kwun Tong, we have the famous cyclist. Well, if you do things rashly, people would respond negatively. I want to say something about port ratio. I agree with members that this is a piece of very iconic location land. It's right at the harbor. And if the government try to do something indiscriminately in trying to get more land, we have to be very careful. This is a piece of land with more than 300 hectares. There have been numerous planning proposals. We have to be very careful about the port ratio. But you should not try to change things rashly. We told the director of planning what we think would be appropriate. Some 20 years have passed, and now suddenly there are strange ideas from the people. Their goodwill may backfire. If you want to make a changes here and there. So what would happen after all? As some members have said, and also the Secretary has said, a good planning for the Kai-tak would provide impetus to the 3 neighboring districts, Kwun Tong, Wong Tai Sin, and Kowloon City. When we talk to people, we are very happy because good planning in the new area would allow people to have a good accessibility, and also the local economy can be promoted. So I would advise the government to be very careful, although it wants to identify more land. In the 1990s, there were a lot of opposing views from either side, and now the Deputy Director, Ms. Wong Yun-sung, is our good friend. The district councils have been urging the government to make suitable changes. We are saddened by what has happened to Kowloon City. The government's way of thinking is that, we have a big piece of land, 320 hectares, and the neighboring district is not our concern. There's a rich cultural heritage in Kowloon City. How can we make sure that our heritage can be taken on board in the development? I hope that throughout debate, some design can be improved. And then we will move with a lot of caution whenever we want to make changes. So I'm a bit concerned about Mr. Alan Leung's remarks. Mr. Charles Mok. Mr. President, Kai-tak new development is very important to Hong Kong. This is beyond dispute. This is the biggest new development area in the urban districts. It can improve our living standards. There can be more facilities and give impetus to the development of other districts in Kowloon. This is a rare opportunity for us. We understand that there have been a lot of promises in terms of PRH and housing supplied. At the time, we can only introduce measures to suppress speculation, and we have to wait for a long time before the demand of the grassroots can be met. Kai-tak provides a rare opportunity to give us flats that would accommodate more than 100,000 people. Other plans, such as reclamation outside Victoria Park, will have to wait for a long, long time before they can be realized. And also, when we tackle URA projects like the one in Kwun Tong, more than 10 years will be required just to resume the buildings. Therefore, I agree with the original motion that the government should give an account on the changes and adjustments to the Kai-tak planning. Also, in relation to point 6, I think the government should review the Kai-tak multi-purpose sports complex. We have been looking at alternatives since the end of last year. We propose that the existing plan for the sports complex can be adjusted so that we can provide more than 10,000 PRH units in a short time. So without affecting environmental quality, we can increase housing supply in Kai-tak. We can retain the original development themes and functions of different facilities. We can also maintain the integrity of the metro park. The major changes we propose is to move the secondary stadium to the south of the major stadium so that the footprint would be reduced. And also, the other facilities should be moved closer to D2 Road. And the southwest land, which is a piece of developed land, can be made used to provide 5,000 HOS and 4,000 PRH units. As for the site zone for RB1. It can be used for PLH so as to provide 7,100 PLH units. To the south of the runway, which is now zone commercial and will be used for hotel. We hope it will become a part of the extended metro park. And the greening should be elevated to one level up so that 150,000 square feet of space can be used for the community arts and catering purposes. The merits are that the population in Kai-tak can increase to 120,000, and there will be 31,000 people more, 31,000 more people living there. And the ratio between public housing and private housing can be changed to 60 to 40. And for the Mata Wai and Tokwa Wan, there will be high quality housing units so as to meet those who would like to get housing units in the same districts. This will expedite urban renewal, and it will not increase the existing plot ratio and development density of residential sites. And the quality living environments will not be affected. And the 5 sites to the north of the runway, which are zoned for RB1, will not delay the progress of the PLH construction if the proposals are taken on board. I have no time to go into details, but I would say that the direction of the government and that of the community are the same, but our proposals will increase the population there by 30%. I hope the government would seriously consider these proposals and review the original planning directions and respond to our request. And I'm also proposing that we should have an city proposal. Our competitors in the region, such as Singapore and Korea, provide a lot of support to the innovative and creative industries. And they will make use of new developments from a small district to an entire new town, such as a new capital for Korea. They will take into account the need to introduce e-applications and the use of IT. They will not just sell land and leave everything to other people. The use of e-applications will be planned from the very start, and they provide a big market and new grounds for try out different techniques and in new development areas. I hope the government can do this so that Kowloon East and Kai-tak can become the first e-city in Hong Kong.
Mr. Peter Chung. President, the Kai-tak Cruise Terminal will be commissioning in June this year, and according to some press reports during the week, well, there have been a lot of discussions in the community about the commissioning of the terminal. Well, after the reprovisioning of the Kai-tak Airport in 1997, actually, the site has been left vacant for more than 10 years. Now that we have the first major development project being commissioned, of course, the community has been very excited about this. And of course, there have been a lot of discussions saying that the cruise terminal can also become the Asian hub of cruise terminal. They can also become the parent port for many cruise liners, and many cruises can also depart from Hong Kong, and that could also increase the patronage by 10%. And in other words, some 5 million visitors will be coming to Hong Kong. In other words, there will be tremendous business opportunities. And of course, the administration has been working hard in painting this rosy picture in order to win more public applause. But then if you are not forgetful, then you would have remember that during the past few terms of government, we also had the cyberport development. In the end, it turned into a property development project, and also the Chinese medicine port has disappeared. And also for the development of private schools, actually it only benefited the private school sector, and also for private hospitals. Of course, they make huge profits, and then for local pregnant women, they have not benefited at all. And therefore, we have to be rational, we have to be vigilant, and for all the planning in Hong Kong, we should not just be looking at the overriding figures, we should not be looking at the growth rate of GDP, and then we will give them the applause. We also have to look at the benefit, the so-called benefit. Is it that the big conglomerates will be making all the money, and then for the grassroots in Hong Kong, they are actually not benefiting at all? Actually, on the contrary, they might be paying heavy prices for that. In fact, a CEO of a major developer actually said that, the administration should give priority to the overall interest of the community. But then, in fact, what he was asking was that the administration should attach importance to boosting the economy so that there will be more jobs for the people of Hong Kong. Well, these are very vague or high-sounding principles, but then for Kai-Tak development, it should be commercially oriented, and there should be more sites for residential development. And in the end, the CEO made it very frank that is under the original plan, there should also be more property development, and if they just increase PRH developments, then that would not be attractive to the visitors, and that would actually mean that Kai-Tak will no longer be very attractive, and that's not in the long-term interest of Hong Kong. This so-called overall interest should always come first. I think in the eyes of the major developers and conglomerates, this is very representative, and therefore Hong Kong people will have to be very vigilant about such remarks. And therefore, in planning for Kai-Tak development, we have to look at the overall development in Kowloon East, and we also have to think out of the box. We should not just be thinking about business development. We should be looking at the early, mid, and advanced term, so that we'll be able to find out what the impact might be for the grassroots. And if you look at Kai-Tak development from Hong Ham, To Kwa Wan, all the way to Kowloon City, San Po Kong, to Ngau Tau Kok, Kwun Tong, actually, in many sections, these are communities for the grassroots. For example, Land Rock Road and also Kowloon Road. Actually, there are many buildings of more than 50 years old, and To Kwa Wan and San Po Kong, we also have many subdivided flats. And yet the administration has never told us very clearly as to what these districts are going to be like after the completion of the Kai-Tak new development area, how it's going to integrate with the neighboring districts. In fact, with regard to the upgrading of all districts, very little has been done, and very slow progress have been made. For example, in Kennedy Town, with regard to the extension of the Island Line, West Island Line, very slow progress has been made, and the developers have been buying up small flats, and as a result, some of the NGOs have been doing a very hard job in helping these residents. For example, they're fighting for in situ resettlement, but then for the police and also the Home Affairs Department, they have been very passive, and sometimes they might actually be onlookers without doing much for the residents, and therefore, very often, the residents have not been fully taken care of. President, the administration is now proposing the Kai-Tak development and the so-called very innovative promenade development. There will be greenery, there will be culture and recreation, and also the sports complex, and also the cruise terminal, and also the tourism center, and also the waterfront promenade. Well, these are not the only elements in the district. We should also be looking at whether the residents in the old districts will be able to stay in their road district or community, and also for the smaller operations and business traders, will they be able to stay, and also for the heritage sites and also the local features, can they be kept and preserved, and also for the small factory operators, will they be able to rent a flat in the old industrial buildings which are cheaper, and also for the tourism sector, will they be monopolized by the large conglomerates? Will they be able to help boost the local economy? And therefore, I suggest that when it comes to planning for Kai-Tak, and also more support measures should be introduced for the neighboring districts. We would also have to take care of the livelihood needs of the residents, and also the preservation and conservation of the old heritage, and also we will have to improve community facilities in order to improve the quality of life for the residents. Well, as a Labour Party representative, we support all the motion and the amendments, but then with regard to Dr. Leong Ka-lau's amendment, we are against one of it. That is, he proposed that private hospital, the site for the private hospital should be kept. We are against commercializing the site for private hospital. Thank you. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok. President, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Wong for moving this motion because it gives us the opportunity to discuss the Kai-tak development. With regard to the Kai-tak sports complex, and also the revitalizing industrial buildings, and also the zoning for Kwok-hung, I'd like to make some demands here. Well, for the Kai-tak development is a very important pillar of the development in the area. And we also hope that it can also be turned into a recreation and leisure center. And of course, the building of a major sports complex is to make sure that there will be high utilization. But then at the same time, we also have to make sure that sports development can be promoted. We are also very concerned about whether or not the complex will be able to meet the demands or the needs of the sector. And we will also have to enhance the standards for hosting mega events there, so that Kai-tak can also be turned into a city where such events can be held, and that would also increase the attractiveness of the city. And also we talk about the recreation and leisure facilities there, and also the facilities will be open for public use in the future, so that we'll be able to resolve the problem of the shortage of such facilities in Kai-tak. In East Kowloon, we have more than 2 million people living there, but then for the sports facilities there is a consistent shortage of such facilities, and we are very concerned about this. And therefore, I hope that with the commissioning of these facilities in Kai-tak, that would help solve the problem. But then we should also improve the sports facilities in the district. We should also encourage the residents there to take part in sports activities. I think that's also very important. Kai-tak is a very important infrastructure development there. It's not just a platform. We can also build it into a sports development and administration center. We should encourage the relevant stakeholders to go into this area so that they can establish office there. Yes, many sports national sports associations have already done that, but then they should also provide support to the elite sports associations, and therefore we should offer them with concessionary rents so that they can set up offices there. And the administration can also offer incentives to them, for example, for training and also supplies, and also venue management and so on, so that they can go into the sports complex in Kai-tak in order to promote the development of the sports sector in Hong Kong. And also Kai-tak development area will also be one of the major waterfront development areas, and also from Tsim Sha Tsui to Kwok-hung, we can also develop it into a cycling track. And the administration should also make better use of Kwok-hung typhoon shelter, so that it can also become a water sports center, and that could also reduce the shortage of berthing spaces in other areas for small vessels. And also a section of about 700 meters of Kwok-hung area would also start works soon, and that's the Kwok-hung Promenade. We should also beautify the Nala so that visitors can also use water taxis to ply between Lei Yu Moon and also other areas, and that could also bring more developments to the area. And also for the enhancement plan of the area, that should also be put up for consultation. That is the Kwok-hung Promenade, and also with the new industrial area all the way to the Kwok-hung industrial area. The site should also be used for developing the creative industry, so that that could also be built into a film and culture-related tourist spots. I remember the administration also said that the industrial buildings should be developed in order to tie in with the development of the culture industry. But then over the years, nothing has been done about it. Revitalizing industrial buildings would often mean that they would become some commercialized, and most of the flats would be released for commercial users, and that would not help support the development of the culture industry. And also very often these users would also be evicted. In fact, I've also received complaints that in the industrial buildings, indoor football pitches would be commissioned, but then it's been pointed out that that would be against the zoning of the area, and therefore, without the approval from the town planning board, the units will have to be reinstated. And they are also not in favor or not in support of such developments. But then for the operator, he's very much an enthusiast in soccer development, and that would also be conducive to the development of sports. And that would also help ease the shortage of sports facilities provided by the administration and help meet the demand for such facilities. But then the operator has not been given any policy support at all. And there are even more examples to illustrate that the sector finds the current policy of revitalizing industrial buildings most disappointing. And therefore, we should take the opportunity to look at it from town planning perspective, and we should look at how we can revitalize industrial buildings in order to support different industries, for example, arts and cultural industry. And also we should also deal with any application for the rezoning of these buildings more flexibly. Finally, I'd like to turn to the community of Kwun Tong, and also two comments about Kai Tak development. Number one is the connection between Kai Tak and Kwun Tong. Well, at the tip of the runway is just a stone's throw away from Kwun Tong without the connecting bridge. Then Kwun Tong residents will have to make a big detour before they can come to the cruise terminal. They will have to go to Kowloon Bay. And vice versa, it would be very difficult for visitors of the cruise terminal to go into the city center. And the Kwun Tong District Council has long ago approved the motion that there should be a bridge connecting the two areas, and therefore I think it's very important to have the bridge built. And I've also suggested that we should have onshore power facilities so that cruise liners can be encouraged to use low sulfur fuel, because air pollution will affect some 280,000 residents there. Yes, the administration said that funding would be made available for that, but then from the construction to the completion, it will take time. And the administration is now encouraging the trade to turn to or to switch to low sulfur fuel, and not much progress has been made. I hope that the administration can expedite this so that the facilities can be completed as soon as possible. With these remarks, I support the original motion. Thank you.
Mr. Tony Chair. Mr. President, Kai Tak is in the heart of urban development. It occupies a special position. It will become the center of the metropolitan. It will become the city of Victoria. So therefore, the development of Kai Tak will have a long-term impact on Hong Kong. The administration must plan at a strategic level. The government must adopt a long-term vision. When we discuss the matter, when we monitor the development of Kai Tak, we mustn't just set our eyes on expediting the pacing of the projects. We shouldn't just look at enhancing the building density at the expense of having a piecemeal approach and having something very commonplace at the expense of having quality design, innovative design. In other words, we won't have a positive impact. For the Kai Tak development, I've already raised my concerns, and they are not limited to the hardware. In fact, I'm concerned about the land use. I'm concerned about the industrial development. I would also want to know about the mode of operation. I'm very concerned about the synergy. And then I want to know whether the quality of our building works would be up to world-class standards. Generally speaking, we want to have a Kai Tak development which hasn't got any element of reclamation. But then what about the OZP? It was in the year 2007 that it was completed. In other words, 5 years have already passed since then. For the various planning parameters, I just wonder whether they are still relevant. If we need to make suitable amendments or enhancement to the previous planning parameters, then we should try to see how we can tie in with the philosophy of seeking changes while keeping stability, so that we can make it more diversified. In particular, for transport and traffic, yes, we are having the Sha Tin Central Link as well as the Route 2 passing Kai Tak. There is a proposal to spend $12 billion to build a monorail in the district. However, I think we have overlooked one point. That is, what about the rail link between East Kowloon and West Kowloon Cultural District area? What about linking it up with the express rail link? It seems that this has been forgotten. Therefore, if we have to adopt the monorail proposal, then the government must actively consider the following. That is, extending the rail service to Lake Yuen-han and Yau Tong so as to promote tourism. Mr. President, I do not object to the idea of turning the former Tai Hung village into a movie-related site. However, Kai Tak has a glorious aviation history, and it has a waterfront. Therefore, I believe that for us to develop something which has an aviation theme and also a waterfront theme in relation to the tourism promotion, it will be to our advantage. We're going to have a world-class sports complex. Therefore, the theme of sport should also feature in the development. In this way, we can encourage the development of the industry of aviation as well as the sports industry. The development of Kai Tak will present a very unique opportunity to us. It is going to be a mega project. The government must have strategies, and the government must be innovative for the major infrastructural projects in the district, as well as the operation of the facilities in the future. I think the government must exercise tighter cost control and must also control the recurrent expenditure. There should be a greater element of greenery, and there should be environmentally friendly technologies. We should give priority to local workers when it comes to employment. Local professionals and local SMEs should be given more opportunities to participate in the Kai Tak development. In this way, the standards of our professionals can be enhanced. Kai Tak and Kowloon East will affect each other in terms of the development. Therefore, for the energizing Kowloon East office as well as the Kai Tak office, I think the two should have close cooperation and the two should tie in with each other. And if necessary, I think they should be sort of rationalized so as to enhance the operational efficiency. Mr. President, Kai Tak development will mean that the adjoining areas will also be redeveloped and subject to rezoning. To the small shops nearby, they will be affected. But then I don't think we should drive them out of the market. We want to have an enhancement for everybody. Therefore, the administration must make sure that for the adjoining areas of Kai Tak, make sure that people won't be affected adversely, in particular the small shop owners. Help them as much as possible to keep the local cultural characteristics as well as the local community economy. Moreover, different bureaus should also take part in the advanced planning of Kai Tak so that the planning will be better. So I speak. Thank you. Mr. Raymond Chen. Mr. President, today, for the second point in the original motion, this is to urge the administration to make sure that the small business traders and workers in the creative and cultural sector in the district can continue their operation to provide residents with inexpensive and quality daily consumer goods amidst the transformation of Kowloon East. Members seeking to amend the motion do not intend to take this out. So I want to take this opportunity to talk about the difficulties faced by the small business traders. Now, we want to have Kai-tak development to tie in with the transformation of Kowloon East. Kai-tak, Kowloon Bay, and Kwun Tong will be formed together. It will become a major business area. It will become the CBD too. Time and again, the administration has been talking about increasing the office floor area, talking about the enhancement of tourism manpower. But then what sort of concept is there in the mind of the administration? What about the original ecology of Kowloon East? Take the case of revitalization of industrial buildings. As an example, in the past, Kwun Tong used to be the heart of our industrial development. With the relocation of industries northwards, the factory buildings have been abandoned. Therefore, to redevelop Kwun Tong, we have to change the use of the former factory buildings, industrial buildings. Maybe they can be converted into office buildings. I think this is the crux of the matter when it comes to the government's policies. But I don't know whether the senior officials are aware of the following. For Kowloon East in particular, for Kwun Tong, a long time ago, young people have already revitalized their factory buildings and industrial buildings. They used to offer a lower rent. Therefore, people who are interested in music have already been using such floor space to practice. We have a lot of rooms for bands to practice. At its peak, 1/4 of the independent bands are having their activities in Kwun Tong. Some of them have already turned their place into a venue called Live House. I don't know whether our members or our officials have visited such a place called the Hidden Agenda. That's the most popular underground music performance venue. It is one of the live houses. It's a very good performance venue, not just for Hong Kong, but also for independent musical bands visiting Hong Kong. They come here to perform without any assistance by the government. In fact, it is a shining pearl in the bleak industrial buildings. The streets used to be very quiet, and yet we have this ear-pleasing music. The senior officials haven't got any vitality at all. They can't think of anything. But throughout, Hidden Agenda had a short life. It was there for 1 year only. It was forced to move out, and it has moved to Kowloon Bay. Well, the government has been talking about policies. In the past, the factory buildings were unpopular, and now because of the revitalization policy, the property developers become interested in the former industrial buildings. The rentals have gone up. And for the band rooms in Kowloon East, maybe when Kowloon East is energized, then all the performing venues will disappear. What is most ironic is that for the EKEO, it was supposed to have the Flyover 1, to have the youth band marathon. But then, in fact, the bands evicted from Kwun Tong have boycotted this event. They would not want to take part in a government-sponsored event. Now, they used to say that they are disinterested in politics. Now politics are extending its long arm to them. Now they're forced to be on the opposite end. I think this is a different kind of struggle, a different kind of fight, and it is very meaningful. Now for the two motion debates today, they are very interesting. They can be seen together. The government has been emphasizing diversity. Among the 6 industries in which we have an advantage, one is supposed to be creative and cultural industry. You talk a lot about public art and creative industries, but then there are empty slogans. The government has never thought about diversity in creative and cultural industries. I think the government has simply dismissed cultural development as something worthless. When it comes to development, the government is only interested in hardware. This is true for West Kowloon Cultural District. The same is true for energizing Kowloon East. What is even more important is software. There is the training of manpower. The government hasn't got much support for this. Usually, we are on our own. We do not have a lot of subsidies from the government. Hong Kongers have got good results in international competitions, but the credit is not with the government. Like the hidden agenda has been driven out of the industrial area of Kwun Tong. They were driven to a place under the flyover. Now they have to rely on their own resources to survive. Now the bench shows are still having a full house. When it comes to development, it doesn't mean that you drive away people already there. But the government is exactly doing that. And it is true in the case of Northeast NT, and it is also true in the case of Kowloon East. Development may just be window dressing only. Thank you. Mr. James Toh.
I thank Mr. Raymond Chan for his speech. Mr. President, actually my speech contains ideas similar to his, so I agree with him 100%. I hope the government would pay attention to cultural activities there. Don't say that because of the need to energize Kowloon East, these activities will become things of the past. Mr. President, I may be touching on a less mentioned subject concerning old Kai-tak, old Kai-tak's planning and other facilities there. I've talked recently to the people related to cruise business. They are experienced practitioners. I'm a bit concerned that the cruise terminal will become a big white elephant in the future. A few years ago, the government wanted to leverage on market players to run the cruise terminal, and that tender exercise was aborted. We were convinced back then that the government thought that this facility would be important for our future economic development, and that we would like to attract well-off tourists. And although the private enterprises couldn't make it viable, we must proceed. We had to proceed with it. I'm concerned about the cruise terminal because if in the vicinity there's nothing to be provided there, because to tie in with the cruise terminal, we need other things. And if we don't have anything, or we have only a few, would the cruise terminal fail to attract no one or only a few tourists? I've been told that in the cruise terminal we have 100,000 square feet of business floor area, shops, but it's just a small space for a cruise terminal, and there are also, of course, other supplementary facilities. If nothing more is provided in the vicinity, although one of the operator is Royal Caribbean, and their companies would send their cruises to berth in Hong Kong in our cruise terminal. But if the plans fall through, it could be a disaster because potential visitors will be deterred. So what kind of supporting facilities should there be? I don't think it's easy to change the overall planning for Kai Tak because many sites have been earmarked for different purposes. If we say there's still some room for adjustment, and of course we're talking about competing needs, we can do some planning to tie in with the cruise terminal so that we can salvage the cruise terminal, or to make things less serious for the cruise terminal in order to prevent spending the billions of dollars without achieving anything. Of course, such uses, such new uses may tie in or in conflict with other uses referred to by other members. I'll be using a couple of minutes to talk about such options. This is a less popular subject. A cruise has arrived to berth in the new cruise terminal on a trial basis. The facilities have not yet been completed, not even the toilets have been built. This is not a cause for applause. I am a big concern about the situation. In the Kai Tak site, have we reserved space for Kowloon City, Wai, and Hong as a site to provide housing to affected residents of redevelopment projects there? We argued with Mrs. Carrie Lam, the then Secretary for Development, as regards whether there were promises made by the government. Well, I don't want to argue about that anymore. Mr. President, as a non-executive director of URA, I fully understand that if we need to have some land to house affected residents of URA redevelopment projects, then redevelopment can be made much easier because the affected residents will very much like to be rehoused in the vicinity. So if in a site adjacent to these districts, which can be used for rehousing these people, it would be much easier for redevelopment projects to be implemented in Wai and other neighboring districts. So I would like to ask whether we can provide some so-called seed sites for rehousing purposes. The government wanted to get as many sites as possible, and that's a previous URA sites which should be used for flat schemes has been taken away or borrowed by the government for other purposes. Would the government be able to find a new site for the flat scheme or for rehousing affected residents? So this is already in a very advanced stage, and we can still do something about it to find land for rehousing affected residents. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, Mr. President, I went down to smoke. I saw this bag in near a refuse bin. The brand is, I think, Ferragamo. I believe it was disposed of by a colleague who just went shopping. This is heavy. This bag would cost you at least $10. And what is this brand? Ferragamo? What kind of business is it in? Fashion? I don't know who is using this. Mr. Leung, what has that got to do with the motion? Of course, it's relevant. Well, energizing Kowloon East and developing Kai Tak will be about this line of business. Well, for the West Kowloon, the cultural district, Mr. Chi-chuen wanted to favor Mr. Lee Ka-shing, and that's why that original plan failed. We have the express rail link linking up West Kowloon Cultural District. Although we wanted to arrange land use fairly, and it's said that if you could gain a foothold in Kowloon West, you are in a controlling position. So at least that's half true for Kowloon East. So we are now seeing the same thing happening here. Mr. Lee Ka-ching is a bad guy. And now the things have changed. Things are very different from the situation in 2001. The mainlanders are much richer now. This is going to be a second CBD. So we don't find this acceptable. Do we need to have the Canton Road with so big a piece of land? We are going to just house 89,000 people. That's also an important constituency for the DAB and FTU. Most of them are new arrivals or elderly people. And how can it be accessible? They will be just selling luxurious products like Ferragamo. What is capital? That is accumulation from commercial commodities. And now you suggest that the North and South aprons and Kowloon Bay and Kowloon Bay and Wong Tai Sin should all be linked up. What are you talking about? Even before this is completed, rental highs are now affecting Kwun Tong, and you refuse to impose a rent control scheme. Mr. Barry Zhang is a bad guy, a big supporter of Chi-wai Leung, the URA head and the mastermind of the Kwun Tong redevelopment project. Mr. James Toh, you are non-executive director of URA, and Mr. Barry Zhang is chairman of a Russian aluminium company. What kind of business is this? The government has given the URA 10 billion and also offer powers to resume land once the 80% threshold is met. What is this, if not a government business collusion? Mr. James Toh asked if the plan would fail. I visited Canary Wharf. Well, it was more or less abandoned, but with more injected funds pouring in, it could be revived. It was revived. Only the first comers would not survive. Brazil, India have all experienced a bubble property sector in the property sector. So the Hong Kong is #1 in terms of rising property prices. Second is Brazil, and then the second is India, and then the third is Taiwan. We have been told that there will be a development in the Loop area and also Northeast NT. All of these are about speculation. And all the 6 important industries will be moved there. And we have the Economic Development Commission. %7 of the budget is going to alleviate poverty. And what about money spent on promoting speculation? What is this if not government business collusion? What are the DAB and FTU members talking about? Mr. Jiang Ka-sun is a member of the DAB and he's trying to make a profit out of it. Mr. President, what is this? If it's not government and government business collusion, they are being generous on our behalf. They make promises and we pay for it. Does any other member
wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Paul Chair. President, originally I thought that basically everything has been said by other members, and I can absolutely agree with most of them. And of course, when Mr. Leung Kwok-hung spoke just now, well, we were awakened, because if we want to have a more balanced development, of course, nobody can say no to this. But then if everybody just second guesses whether somebody might stand to benefit from this, I think it's not going to do any good to any of us, because we have to make sure that there is a level playing field for everybody. And Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion has been very comprehensive, basically, for all the issues relating to Kai-tak development. They have been covered, and even if we try to fill in the gaps, well, together with the amendments, I think they basically completed the picture. Unless I try to repeat some of the points already made, I think there is nothing more that I can add to what has already been said. But then I'd just like to add to this. That's about our water and also our harbor. If you drive, in particular, in areas near Yaotong, well, the Kwok-hung Bay can be very scenic, and if you can drive all the way up to the waterfront, and if you can actually go into the water, that could be really very nice. But then very often you have railings along the waterfront, or there would be hoardings and so on, or private developers would be allowed to build their own buildings or very expensive high-end shopping centers and so on. And yet we have not been able to visit New York City, Boston and Vancouver. They do have very nice bays. And concerning the concept of water, they also have some innovative thinking or concept of that. And in the design of these areas, very often the people can be connected to the water, so that people can live by the water. And of course, it's not like the so-called Coffee Beach or Castle Peak Bay that we were used to when we were young. But then I think we have to allow the people to have access to the waterfront. And therefore, in the detailed design of Kai-tak, I hope that you can apply this concept, that is, people have to have access to the water. And also, some people think that because of the high tides in our waters, that's why using boat as one of our transport modes is a shrinking business. Just now, Priscilla Leung also referred to this. In fact, with regard to the concept of water taxi, well, that's been discussed, and actually the former Secretary for Development, she also said that she liked the idea of introducing water taxi. But then, of course, we also have the issue of regulation and also pollution. And if we are able to use smaller vessels that are environmentally friendly, I don't know if you've been to Vancouver. In fact, such taxis are very mobile, and also where the land traffic is very congested. All right, for the Western Harbour Crossing is less congested, but then even for the Eastern Harbour Crossing, it's also becoming very congested, and therefore using water taxi can also become an alternative option for tourists and visitors. And also from the Kai-tak airport site, and if it can be linked up to the Kwun Tong district. At present, there is no land connection, and if you can use water taxis, then it can be a way of speeding things up. And of course, Mr. Chen Kam-lam has been emphasizing the importance of the monorail. I don't know what's in your mind, Secretary. Apparently, there are also some opposition voices, but then Mr. Chen Kam-lam and the DAB have been making these suggestions many years ago, and there have been a lot of discussions on this. And I think that, well, sooner or later, you will have to have a connection between the two areas. And just now, Mr. Lam Kwok-hung also referred to the Canary Wharf in London. In fact, whether it's a Canary Wharf in London or Darling Harbour in Sydney, basically is making use of an old warehouse area or old industrial area at the waterfront, so that they can be renovated and turned into a very popular tourist district, which are world class. And I think one of the critical factors in doing this is to connect Kai Tak with Kwun Tong. Failing that, even if it might not be as worrying as what Mr. James Toh said, that it's going to be a disaster or a complete failure, well, even if it's not as bad as that, at least if we really want to energize the entire area, that would be a very important factor. The reason why I did not agree with James Toh, because if James Toh had been elsewhere and had he taken any cruise tour, then even for very famous cruise terminal area like Caribbean, and also in the Greek islands, Santorini, well, these are famous islands, but then they are very remote areas, and the facilities are very few, and because the areas themselves are very attractive to tourists, it's not a question of whether or not they have very well-structured cruise terminal facilities. I think that's not important at all. But then I think you will have to look at Hong Kong itself, whether or not Hong Kong as a tourist attraction is attractive enough. That would be the most important factor in attracting cruise liners to come into Hong Kong, and therefore I think the connection is the most important element determining the success or failure of the development. Well, as time is ticking, and then when people see me standing up, they will know that it's time for us to wrap up our discussion or debate. I hope that the public should be able to see that for the Kai Tak site, which has been left vacant for so many years, we can see things or buildings put up as soon as possible. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, you may now speak on the amendments, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you, President. First of all, I'd like to thank the members who have moved amendments. Altogether, there are 5 amendments, and one is a further amendment. Well, as the night is it's getting late, still there are more than 10 members speaking, and I think it's really quite difficult as it's getting late. I think they have all enriched my original motion, and therefore, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of them. And I support most of the amendments. For example, I support the proposal to expand the scope of the development area. That's why Mr. K.K. Fong, Ms. Dari Lee, they are both proposing this, and I think it's reasonable. With regard to the monorail, yes, of course, we are in support of it. But then if there is a better transport mode, then it's okay to us too. We will be prepared to support that too. With regard to the runway tip, connecting it with Kwun Tong, I think it's a very important facility. But then at the same time, we also know that the typhoon shelter is a much needed facility. How do we balance the two? I suggest that the administration should consider this. That is, in the Netherlands, in Europe, we do have some bridge that can be opened up when it's needed. Well, when I was a seaman, when I went to the Netherlands, I passed through many of these bridges that can be opened And is it suitable for the tip of the runway? So I hope that the administration can look into it. You can also ask some experts to take a look, because between the bridge and the typhoon shelter and the various users, we need to balance things. And also on the facilities on the onshore, I think that's on onshore power. Well, many people would go for low sulfur fuel, but then as an experienced seafarer, I think the efficiency is limited, because in the past we did use that. In fact, for many of the cruise liners, when they berth, they would also switch to low sulfur fuel, but then after berthing, the power supply and also for heat supply, they would have to burn fuel. And I think the best way out is to use onshore power. And therefore, I hope that the administration should be more positive in providing onshore power. It should expedite things. And also, as and a piece of information for Mr. Alan Leung, in fact, on board of the vessel, they do not need to have onshore power, because basically after they have burst, all the mechanics will stop, and they will have to rely on such power, and therefore they would have facilities to connect with onshore power. And therefore, you need not worry about that. They already have such facilities on board of the cruise liner. And I support all the amendments except for the amendment proposed by Mr. Alan Leung, that is within the Kai-Tak new development area. With regard to the sports complex, he would like to move that a bit further so that more public housing units can be built. I think it's a good thing if it's possible or feasible. But then, as Ms. Chen Yuen-han just said, she called up the relevant parties because she had some friends working on energizing Kowloon East, and they are university professors, and she consulted these professors, and she was concerned about the ventilation corridor going into Kowloon City, and air quality might be affected, and therefore we dare not support it right now because we haven't clarified the position, because his proposal is very specific. And therefore, on this particular issue, at this stage, we dare not give him our support yet, but then I'll be prepared to support other amendments.
Secretary for the Development. Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Wong and 6 other members who have moved amendments. 13 other members have also spoken. I'll try my best to give a reply to the concerns raised. Mr. Wong Kwok-kin mentioned the possibility of expediting the expansion of United Christian Hospital. It involves a lot of major issues. We have to consider some objective factors. We have to make sure that the expansion project would not jeopardize the day-to-day operation of the hospital. Therefore, the hospital authority has to phase in the expansion. It involves a large number of procedures and the interfacing of the various steps. There isn't much room to compact the timetable further, but surely we'll go back to see if we can do anything to complete the project earlier. For the time being, it is estimated that it will take 9 years' time to complete the expansion. The second point made by Mr. Wong and some other members was the monorail system. Just now, when members spoke, they gave us their different views. In my opening speech, I already said that later on we will have a consultation exercise. That would be a very good platform for us to have an in-depth discussion. As to the concern about the impact on the cultural and creative industries, many members have said that they were really concerned. We'll try our best to do as much as we can to take care of their needs. Well, in fact, under the Economic Development Committee, there is a working group. They look at the potential of the creative and cultural industries. They're trying to carry a study to see how the government can render some support to them. onshore power supply. I think you know that it is already part of our scheme. Mr. Wong has said that we need to move more quickly. We will certainly bear this point in mind. Mr. Chen Kam-lam talked about the conversion of industrial buildings and whether we can do more. Well, in fact, when it comes to the revitalization of industrial buildings, since we have announced the policy, the government has already provided a lot of economic incentives. Some planning applications have been approved. In the policy address, we have also mentioned certain details in relation to the improvement of the policy. Once we are ready, we will make further announcements. As to whether the Urban Renewal Authority will play a more active role, well, last year, for the redevelopment of industrial buildings, there were two pilot schemes, one in Kowloon, one on Hong Kong Island. In one case, industrial buildings would be redeveloped into residential buildings and another into office buildings. We'll try to assess the outcome of the pilot schemes before we define the role of the URA. Mr. Chi-wai talked about the Kai-tak development and its consultation process. He wondered whether there was room for improvement. I note his concern. In future, when there is a consultation, we will certainly bear this point in mind to seek further improvement. Mr. Wu also said that instead of having Hong Kong properties for Hong Kong people, we should have more PRH and HOS or even sandwich class housing on Kai-tak. Maybe that would be better, according to him. I want to point out that we have to bear in mind the balance between public housing and private housing. But in fact, many Hong Kong citizens are not eligible for subsidized housing. In other words, we have to solve their problems of housing in another way. So we need to cater for the needs as well. Mr. Alan Leung and Mr. Charles Mok talked about the layout of the Kai-tak new development area. They have come up with very specific ideas. Do you think that some fine-tuning will provide another 10,000 more flats? And they think that it would be easy and then the government should do this. I know it is already very late and you are all very tired, but I still need to elaborate on this point. It was in 1992 when we have the Southeast Kowloon development that we first considered Kai-tak development. At that time, we talked about 300 hectares of land involving reclamation. After consultation in 1998, 123 hectares of land was reserved for housing to take care of 320,000 people. Later on, it was reduced to 460 hectares, and reclamation was reduced to 133 hectares, and then the population would be 260,000. Land would be reserved for multi-purpose sports complex and a cruise terminal. But then later on, reclamation was the subject matter of a trial, and then we started afresh and we have a zero reclamation option, and we re-examined different suggestions. Currently, we are talking about a site of 320 hectares of land accommodating 89,000 people. In 2007, the Sitting Council took a look of the proposal to have housing, commercial, tourism, and community users, as well as infrastructural projects. It was on that basis we were able to seek funding. The Kai-tak planning has undergone 15 years of discussion before we came to a conclusion. Time and again, we consulted the district councils as well as the LegCo. Community participation was also very active. Finally, on the basis of zero reclamation, between 2004 and 2006, and with 3 rounds of extensive public participation, we concluded on the plan before you, and then we also drafted the OZP for Kai-tak. if we are to amend the layout in relation to the sports complex so as to provide another 10,000 flats, it means that a number of sites intended for sports complex, park, and medium density residential uses will be swapped. In other words, it is not a very small change. It is going to be more than a fine-tuning. It is going to be a substantial change. The sports complex is to occupy a large site. If we want to keep the facilities, then as a result of such constraint, we have to do the planning again. And then in terms of the support facilities, if we want to house more people, then community facilities and infrastructural facilities have to be boosted. We need to take care of water supply, power supply, drainage, and we have to reconsider the number of schools needed as well as the open space required, air ventilation, as well as the interfacing with the neighboring areas. We have to consider the technical feasibility. We have to consult the public again. We must go through a very adequate public consultation exercise. We have to come back to the LegCo and we have to talk to the district council, and we have to go through the town planning process. It will take a few years' time. I think in the interim, we have to freeze all the development. In other words, we can't provide land for housing timely. We can't meet the urgent needs of the public. Moreover, for the sports complex in Kai Tak, we are already in the process of inviting letters of intention or expression of interest from the stakeholders. Therefore, if we are to adjust the plan, then the time to complete the Kai Tak sports complex will be affected. And that's why when I first spoke, I said that we were having some planning studies and technical feasibility studies, but we don't want to jeopardize the land supply in the coming 5 years. That would be the basis. Moreover, Mr. President, the MTRCL is making use of the northwest corner of the site for the Sha Tin Central line, and it will only be completed in 2017. And then it would only be then that we are able to vacate it for housing. It won't be available in 5 years' time. Therefore, for us to adjust the Kai Tak planning, it will be of a limited magnitude. And in fact, it will involve quite a lot of work. And we are going to consult the public. We have to go through the town planning process. Mr. President, therefore, when it comes to planning, we can't be doing academic exercises only. And then Dr. Leung Ka-lau talked about centers for the elderly health centers. We have already got elderly health centers for all the 18 districts, so we don't have intent to add more. Dr. Leung Ka-lau wondered whether we could reserve floor area for health needs, and also RCH for elderly, RCH for PWDs. We'll ask our relevant policy bureaus to bear the point in mind. Mr. President, for the GIC sites, a number of members mentioned this, and they had certain criticism to air. I want to respond to this point. Our professional departments had looked at that, and we have to carry out an analysis before we do any rezoning. Professionals from different disciplines have been providing objective information to us. And if we want to change, we have to consult the public after consulting the professionals, and then we have to go through the town planning process. The statutory process has to be initiated, triggered, and then representations will be received. And planning is a continuous work. We won't I think we always have to fine-tune our planning in the light of changes in the community. We will take into account the waterfront factors. Now, for the GIC sites, we have to check whether the sites are no longer needed for the originally intended uses, and we want to know whether there will be underutilization. We will consult the government departments to see if we still need to earmark the sites for such purposes and to keep the facilities. Moreover, we'll also make reference to the Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines to make sure that the facilities needed by the community will not be affected or become inadequate. We'll take an overall look. We'll look at the environment, the open space, as well as the transport needs. We'll try our best to prevent imposing anything without an overall view. We don't want to result in any negative impacts. In the past 2 months, we have already secured the support of district councils when we try to rezone certain sites. Just now, some lawmakers criticize us for including sites which haven't been rezoned into the land disposal program, land sale program, saying that we are upsetting the established procedures. But this is far from the facts. What we are doing is in fact along the same line as what we have been doing in the past. On the one hand, we want to have transparency for the market participants to know early so that they can get prepared as to which sites will be available in the future so that they can prepare for the tendering. I think this is a long-established procedure. For Kam-lam, for Stocks Road, we have already done the same. Some of the sites may still be subject to a short-term tenancy, and they may still be being used as a work site, but such sites will still be included in the land sale program. I don't think we should wait until it is clear. I think we can do it in parallel, and then we can have a shorter timetable, a shorter time duration, and then it will benefit all. Mr. President, Mr. Stephen Ho said that we have to introduce green buildings, and he had said that we should make sure the greening would feature prominently in the new development area. We agree with him. Mr. Lee wondered why energizing Kowloon East has not been extended to Kowloon West, Kowloon City. Yes, we haven't included that, but we do attach a lot of importance to urban renewal in Kowloon City. We have got a platform for the rejuvenation of Kowloon City. A lot of activities have been held. For the past week or two, I attended meetings to see for myself how Kowloon City will be rejuvenated and what more we can do. As to whether we can reserve certain land in Kowloon, in Kai Tak development, for the purpose of rehousing residents affected by urban renewal. Well, there is one site on Kai Tak given to URA for the purpose of flat-for-flat exchange. For the remaining area, I don't think we have room to do it anymore, but we will certainly check again to see whether it is possible. But of course, I cannot say with certainty that it is impossible. But then in the case of Kowloon City and To Kwok Wan, whenever we talk about urban renewal, we will certainly remember this point. Yes, urban renewal can be done in, say, for example, To Kwa Wan. But sometimes we are not able to have in-situ rehousing, and therefore the redevelopment process has been obstructed. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok wondered whether we could allow the different NSAs to set up offices in the sports complex. I will reflect the opinion to the Home Affairs Bureau. Mr. President, that's all I want to say as a reply. Thank you.
Mr. K.K. Fung, you may now move your amendment. President, I move that Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion be amended. I now propose the question to you, and that is that the amendment moved by Mr. Frederick Fung to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion be passed. I now put a question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Chen Kam-lam, as Mr. K.K. Fung's amendment has been passed, I have given leave for you to revise the terms of your amendment as set out in the order paper. President, I move that Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung be further amended by my revised amendment. President, basically there are 2 points here. Number one, that is point 4 and point 6. That is about the monorail system, extending it to To Kwa Wan. But then on the second point, we have kept the original motion. That is the 6th point. That is about the construction of the container cruise and also the connecting bridge. And also point 14 about the Yuen-han to Sham Shui Post waterfront promenade. And also in the Kwun Tong Typhoon Shelter, the berthing for yachts and also water leisure sports facilities. And also there are also some textual amendments. All right. I now put a question to you, and that is Mr. Chen Kam-lam's amendment to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung be passed. I now call upon Mr. Frankie Yik to move an amendment to Ms. Chen Kam-lam's amendment. Mr. Frankie Yik. President, I move that Mr. Chen Kam-lam's amendment be amended. I now propose the question to you, and that is that the amendment moved by Mr. Frankie Yik to Mr. Chen Kam-lam's amendment be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. I now put a question to you, and that is that Mr. Chen Kam-lam's amendment as amended by Mr. Frankie Yik to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung be passed. I now put a question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, you may now move for your amendment. As the amendments of Mr. K.K. Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, and Mr. Frankie Yik have been passed. Page 34. President, I move that Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, and Mr. Frankie Yik be further amended by my revised amendment. I now propose the question to you, and that is that Mr. Wu Chi-wai's amendment to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, and Mr. Frankie Yik be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Alan Leung, as the amendments of Mr. K.K. Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Chi-wai have been passed, you may now move your revised amendment. President, I move that Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Chi-wai be further amended by my revised amendment. I now propose the question to you, and that is that Mr. Alan Leung's amendment to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. Frederick Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Chi-wai be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. For those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. Mr. Lam Kwok-hung claims the division. The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
開始表決。
Voting begins.
請各位核對所作嘅表決。
Members, please check your votes. If there is no question, voting is closed and the results are displayed. Those returned from the FC, 20 present, 11 for, no against, 9 abstentions. Those from the GC, 22 present, 11 yes, 2 noes, and 8 abstentions. I think the question is not agreed by majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negative. Dr. Leung Ka-lau. As the amendments by Mr. Frederick Fong, Mr. Chi-chuen, Kam-lam, Mr. Frank Ki-yik, Mr. Chi-wai, and Mr. Leung have been passed. You may now move to revise the amendment. President, I move that Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. K.K. Fong, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Frank Ki-yik, Mr. Chi-wai, and Mr. be passed. I now put a question to you as stated. That is that Dr. Leung Ka-lau's amendment to Mr. Wong Kwok-kin's motion as amended by Mr. Mr. K.K. Fong, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Frank Ki-yik, Mr. Chi-wai be passed. I now put a question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, you may now reply, and you have 3 minutes 24 seconds. President, I'd like to thank those members who have spoken and moved amendments to my motion today. They have all enriched the substance of my motion. But at the same time, I'd also like to say that I'd like to condemn or reprimand Mr. Leung Kwok-hung for some of what he said in his speech, because without grounds, he just criticized the DAB and the FTU, saying that we are doing the energizing Kowloon East project for another conglomerate. Actually, the FTU, well, Ms. Chen Yuen-han, in promoting Kowloon East and conservation and development, well, I think when compared to, well, actually, she had started this long before the energizing Kowloon East project. In fact, behind her, there were many conservationists and also academics and scholars, including some very familiar faces and groups to the Pan-Democrats. You can also look into that. And yet, despite all that, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, just without any grounds, said that we were working for the interests of some conglomerates. I think that should be reprimanded. Originally, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, for what he said, I would not be bothered by what he said, because I couldn't understand the logic behind his speeches, and very often he would be saying things without the support of facts and so on, and therefore I would just brush it aside. But then he just pointed his finger at the FTU and us, and I think that's unacceptable. That's why I'd like to take the opportunity to say this to Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. I'd like to say that it's regrettable, and I'd like to condemn you for what you said just now. And also with regard to what the Bureau Director said in his opening speech, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, as a point of order, well, can he doubt my integrity? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, this is not a point of order. You've already used your time to speak. I'd just like to ask a question. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, how did you chair the meeting? Well, according to the rules of procedure, every member will be given a chance to speak. But then, can he doubt the integrity of his colleague? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, I've repeatedly said that after any member has spoken, and if any other member has a different view, then you cannot stand up again to refute what he has just said, because you have already used your speaking time, and please comply or observe the rules of procedure. Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, you may continue. with regard to the response made by the Bureau Director in his opening speech, saying that sites have been reserved in the Kai-tak development site for the construction of a general hospital. We are very pleased about this. I hope that that can be implemented as soon as possible, because for Wong Tai Shin, Kowloon City, and To Kwa Wan, residents have been waiting for a long time for that. With regard to the monorail system, you said that it cannot be linked up with the uphill housing estates, and of course I'm disappointed. But of course I hope that you can look into the technical issues, and if they are not resolvable, then you will have to come up with other solutions, so that for the uphill housing estates, they will have to be linked up or connected with the trunk road system, so that that would make it easier for them to be connected to the other districts. All right, I now put a question to you, and that is that the motion moved by Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, as amended by Mr. K.K. Fung, Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, and Dr. Leung Ka-lau be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I say, what Mr. Leung Kwok-hung claims a division, as we did not shorten the time for the bell to ring, so the bell will ring for 5 minutes.
開始表決。
Voting begins.
請各位核對所作。
Members, please check your votes, and if there is no question, voting is closed and the results are displayed. Those returned from the FC, 20 present, 20 yes, no noes, and no abstention. Those returned from the GC, 22 present, 19 yes, 2 noes, and no abstention. The question is passed by a majority respectively of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion as amended passed. I now adjourn the Council until 11 o'clock on Wednesday, 27th of March 2013.